Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming's Sunday podcast. I am your host, Flap. Welcome to the show. And as ever, we have got some hot topics for tonight, an even hotter panel. It's been another week of pretty good gaming news, actually, as we've mentioned before. To be an Xbox podcaster, it's great times for us. We're feasting on all of this information that's piling in. So absolutely fantastic to be part of the Xbox scene at this moment in time. But before we get into any of the hot topics for tonight, let's introduce the whole GPG crew. We're here in our fullness. No guests tonight, so you've got unadulterated GPG crew tonight. I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to shake it up a little bit, actually, because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but we've changed things up slightly, and we're actually using OBS for the first time for our podcast. So thought I'd give it a go. Gives you a lot more control. And it doesn't cost £25 a month, which is always a bonus. So, unlike StreamYard. So let's get straight into it. Luke Steele, welcome to the show, sir. Are you still reveling in last night's victory with the Rogue Company over Wandering Dutch's crew?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that sustains me throughout most of the weekend, to be honest. So, yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun. And, it's cool that, I've played that game now because it's actually a lot of fun. And I will be keeping it installed, and I think I'll keep playing it because it's awesome and I recommend it. So yes, I'm very well, and looking forward to, as always, to discussing some really cool topics.
Fantastic. Yes, I could have written quite a few topics for tonight. I didn't, thankfully. I've written down 3, if not 4/5, that we might be able to get through tonight. Chat. We'd love you to participate with us tonight. In fact, we've already got some healthy chat going on as we speak, so very grateful for that. But without any further ado, let's come to Puxley, my wingman. How are you, my friend? All good?
Yes. Hello. Good evening. I'm doing very well, thanks. Went out for a few walks today.
Nice.
Not long got back, but now I'm ready to talk games with you lovely lot.
Well, we're still technically in lockdown in the UK until tomorrow, I believe. When some of the shops start opening up and things. I don't know what it's like stateside. What's it like over in Jersey, Luke?
It's pretty much back to normal, actually. Apart from nightclubs, you can pretty much do what you want now. So
excellent.
So I've been desperate for a haircut since July last year. So this is my week.
Yeah, this is a big week.
Excellent. Well, you've got dreadlocks now, have you, Pucks?
It's not far off. Yeah, it's pretty long. I've not had it this long ever in my life, so
Really?
I don't like it. I can't wait to have it all sheared off.
Excellent. Well, hopefully tomorrow you can go and do that.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
And last, and by no means least, Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you very much, Flap. How are you doing, my friend?
Yes, all good, all good. Like Luke was saying, I really enjoyed last night's game.
Yeah, it was good fun.
I am so grateful to Dutch and his crew to introducing me, if not us, to this game, because we had an absolutely fantastic time. And it does take me back to the old CSGO days of when we used to play that. And it's great. What have you been playing, actually, Scott, this week? Have you been playing anything other than Rogue Company?
A lot of Outriders for me, actually,
Okay.
and a sprinkling of Octopath Traveler. I think that's probably all I can call it. So, I've been really, really enjoying Outriders, especially since it's been a hell of a lot more stable recently. They introduced a patch which came out on Saturday, but even before then, the servers were a little bit better. I've been playing a lot of that Rogue Company and Octopath. I'm really, really enjoying Octopath. To be honest, I did start it a little bit on the Switch when they first released the demo, but I never ended up buying it for the Switch. So it's been really nice to jump into that. It's just such a magical little RPG. The art style, the music, and then they just got a nice little twist on the combat, which is very familiar, but there's like a few little things that make it seem fresh as well. So really, really nice to play like what is kind of an old school JRPG in some senses, but with a couple of modern twists.
Yeah, I'm still yet to give that a go, much to my dismay. It's just a matter of time, isn't it? You know, we've had this conversation many times, but Game Pass is such a fantastic service that it's just there's too much in there, isn't it? It's like, oh my god, I can imagine being a kid and going into Blockbusters and saying, you can watch any film that you want. It'd just be mind blowing, and just finding the time to just watch all and take in all of this content.
Yeah, well, my backlog, it gets bigger with pretty much each passing month. But what I tend to do is when a new game comes out, so for example, Octopath, I add it to my backlog, and then I've got like a pin section of basically it's just called backlog, and it must be about 30 odd games long now. But when a new game comes out, I add it to the front generally because it's brand new. I really want to play it, like Octopath. I really want to get into it, especially with it being like a 60-hour campaign. So then the games at the bottom of that backlog are just being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
Just out of interest, have you had any games that have been on your backlog that have actually disappeared out of the service that you've not had a chance to play?
Not yet, no. Not that I know of, at least anywhere. But I'm pretty sure all of them are still in there. To be honest, so I'm trying to think what's actually come out of Game Pass recently. Nothing major sticks out. I don't think they've had any sort of major games leave the service. Not that I can recall anyway. So no, thankfully they're all still there.
They've had GTA 5 come and go, well, come back again now, haven't they? And obviously Red Dead 2 and things like that. But you got to be honest, right? When games come into the service, it's like, oh wow, I'll get all excited and it's fantastic. But I've got to be honest, when the games leave, it's like, I've either played it at that point or, it's quite a strange thing, isn't it? I've never once had a game leave the service thinking, oh damn, I still haven't played that.
I think.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I think normally because they're in sort of a minimum 6 months, either you've played it or if you haven't played it within 6 months, you can probably assume that maybe it's not for you. But even then, I guess the good thing is they let you know that it's going to be leaving ahead of time, and you can buy it at a 20% discount before it leaves the service as well. So it is good from that perspective. But if I haven't got to get to a game in the 6 to 12 months it's in the service, then I'm not missing out too much from my own personal perspective, I don't think.
No, exactly. No, I feel exactly the same. Pucks, what have you been playing this week? And have you missed out on any games that have left Game Pass before you've had a chance to play them?
Not particularly. I mean, for this week, I'm actually the opposite of Scott, I think. I've actually been playing quite a lot of Octopath Traveler with my partner and only a bit of Outriders. Apart from that, not much else, actually, really. I've actually been... I know people are aware of this, but I've actually been diving into teaching myself Unreal Engine again. So I've just finished putting a little project together. I was going to post up in the next day or two, actually, for people to just try out.
That's cool.
But outside of that, I've not played much else. In terms of missing things from Game Pass, not really, because at least from my perspective, I think like a lot of people, especially if you're on PC, you tend to go through the weekly or monthly cycle of claiming games or free titles from Twitch Prime or Epic Games Store or the Amazon Store, whichever other ones there are. So I've got this massive library of smaller titles, which if they come out of the service, I tend to look at them and think, oh, I've got that on my PC on some library I claimed for free anyway. So it's no big deal for me. I think the only one I didn't really miss out on it because I have it on PS4, but the only game I wanted to try on the Series X was Witcher 3. I know they got pulled out a while back, but again, I've played the game, so I'm not too fussed about that one, but I'll probably come back to it at some point, but it's no big deal for me at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's strange, isn't it, how that happens? Like I say, I've not had a single game leave the service where I've been kind of annoyed by it, but there we go. Actually, saying that, you've been playing Naruto Boy as well, haven't you? This is your gameplay footage that we've got on the screen currently.
Yeah, I played about just short of an hour and a half of it. It's interesting. I mean, don't mock my gameplay too much. It's quite bizarre, actually, because there's like when it comes, you see like a lot of these characters, but like the prompt to interact with them is in a very specific spot.
Oh, it's a bit fiddly, is it?
Yes, you might see me move left and right, just waiting for that little B button to appear to then interact with things. And some of the puzzles are a bit obscure at first. You see me running around for a bit, I think about 40 minutes in, just kind of not knowing what I'm doing, but I do figure it out, and then you then kind of clicks as to the type of game it is and how you should look at the puzzles, kind of thing. So it gets better from that point. I enjoy it so far. It's a really good game. I encourage people to try it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And why wouldn't you? If you've got Game Pass, give it a go, as long as you've got the time. Luke, you've pretty much finished Outriders, haven't you? You're done now.
With Outriders?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much... I mean, I'm not... I've done the main campaign. There's endgame content, which I'm plodding through, and I mean, I'll probably do all of the expeditions, but I just don't know how long that will take me. I've got like, I think if you include the demo hours, I've probably got about 60 hours out of that game, which is, for me especially quite a lot. So I'm really, I've really enjoyed it, and it's not a perfect game, and it's not kind of particularly great at anything, but I just think it's fun, and for Game Pass especially, I mean, it's fantastic. So yeah, I've been going through that. I just completed with my partner. It Takes Two. About 5 days ago, which is just a wonderful game, and I'd strongly recommend if you have someone you can find to play that game with, that you should, because I think it's an amazing experience, and just such a unique and creative game in what it does. So and then apart from that, I played a little bit of Narita Boy as well, which I really like.
Okay.
I'm going to dive into that a bit more, and the only other game I've been playing is Oddworld Soulstorm at last.
Yes, I saw your post on that.
570. Yeah, seeing it like hundreds of state of plays and stuff like that. So, and it's really cool. It's really fun. I'm getting through it very slowly because, as with all of the classic Oddworld games, there's a lot of trial and error in them, and they can be very punishing in a lot of respects. So you have to kind of take your time with them. But it's it's a really cool kind of setting, and the 2D 3D stuff that they do is super cool, and so we've been kept quite busy, and then I think I'm just eagerly looking forward to something like Returnal at the end of the month, which is kind of one of the bigger games coming out in soon. So yeah, plenty to play, plenty coming up as well.
Well, not that I own a PS5, but the more I see of Returnal, the more I seem to want to play it. It looks really good. I'm really excited for that game. But that's pretty cool. Well, we've got some healthy chat going on. Thanks everyone here for being here already. Well, let's get on with topic one, shall we? Let's have a little bit of fun on topic one. I quite like playing the speculation game, and chat, please feel free to get involved in this one, because there is no right or wrong answer. Perhaps we'll come to you first, Luke, as well. So, there's a rumoured 4 events that Xbox are going to have that we know about so far. And that doesn't include the Game Awards or anything like that. I think there's a couple of events before E3. If obviously Xbox are at E3, and there's a post E3 event as well that I've heard rumoured. Very interesting to sort of see what you think might be coming to these events, and how Xbox are going to pace the information. What games do you think we're going to see updates for? Everything, or just select ones?
I think if it's before E3, I would expect there to be one primary event where you get maybe you get some first party stuff, and I think if that is the case, it would be quite limited, because I think they really do enjoy the kind of E3 periods, and they like doing these big shows, right? And we already know they're going to be at E3 digitally this year. What form take, I don't know, but presuming that they do like a normal digital show, I think the vast majority of stuff will be there. So I think they'll have one show where they might show some first party stuff off. Maybe just 1 or 2 games. I don't know what. Like, I don't know which games you would choose for something like that. But I think if they do, these rumored additional shows, I would imagine they're probably like Game Pass orientated. If anything, they might focus on those sorts of things rather than be, here's a new reveal of a game or something like that. But do you think it's quite hard.
Do you think they're going to push Flight Sim quite hard? Because they seem to make quite a big deal of it when it was coming to consoles and was going to be on Series X and stuff, and it seems to have died a death. I can't believe it's taken this long to bring it to consoles, in all honesty, but. I mean, that's due in summer anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it's due in summer. I get why it's taken this long, because frankly, I think that it's an incredibly demanding game. So I suspect the work to bring it to consoles, even though Series X is very powerful. It's not a high end equivalent to some of the stuff that Flight Sim runs on, right? And
it's not a 3090, no.
No, and it's really, really demanding. So I suspect there's a lot of work that's gone into that to try and, twofold. One, to try and get it to run, but also the bigger issue, I guess, from a development perspective on that game is actually making it work on a controller, because it's, you know, on PC you can pop a controller in and use it, but it's clearly not designed for that use, right? It's designed for either some dedicated hardware or a keyboard and mouse. So I think, and I don't know whether they'll. I mean, I think they will push it to some extent, because it's certainly a spectacular game to look at, but it's an incredibly niche game, right? It's not going to drive people to Game Pass on console, especially. It's not something I would think that console gamers would be super into, although I think there is a market for it. So, you know, at one of these upcoming events pre-E3, I could definitely see them doing something, like having something on it. Because, as you say, it's been quite a while since I've actually said anything about it on console. So, yeah. So I think they'll probably show that. I'd like to see, like, in terms of pre-E3, I'd like to see an update on something like Hellblade 2, because I think that's probably closer to having something shown for it than some other titles that they've already revealed.
A lot of us were expecting that in the last showcase, weren't we? That just didn't appear.
Yeah. You got a vid doc on Iceland, which was
we got a smidgen, just not really know what everyone was hoping for.
What was that? The Game Awards? I think it was, wasn't it?
Well, the original reveal was at the Game Awards, wasn't it?
No, the update. What was the update that we got?
Oh,
There was
a live showcase.
That was at the showcase, the big Xbox first party showcase.
Yeah, the July one.
Yeah, and it was a you know, we're pleased to reveal this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it was coming up to a year ago that now, Flap.
Yeah.
That's God. Wow.
And then it was just by the way, the game set in Iceland, which everybody had already figured out, by the way. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, well, cool. So yeah, big deal. So I'd like to see something of that. I think they released that screenshot a little bit ago, didn't they, on Twitter, which is small, but it was something on the game, and it'd be nice to actually see something from it.
I was just hoping that they hadn't overpromised, that was kind of a CGI, and everyone was like, oh my God, this is the first sort of next-gen vision or first game that we've seen running next-gen, and all of the devs are thinking, oh shit, that's not quite what it looks like, and they're having to spend all of this time trying to make the game look more like that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would be very surprised. I would be very impressed and very surprised if it looked like the original teaser. I mean, first of all, like, you know, that wasn't representative of the gameplay anyway, because it's purely a kind of cinematic kind of showpiece.
Well, but they never really came out and stated that, did they? They didn't say, "Hang on a minute, you know, this is representative." Did they? They've kind of let the narrative run that this was actual sort of what we could expect, haven't they?
I think they said it was in I think they said it was in engine. So, but
but what does that actually mean? Does that just mean it's running in Unreal 4 or something then?
Well, yeah, I mean, precisely. The point is that many different developers often put out what they call in-engine footage.
Yeah.
And usually it's some kind of, you know, at least from the ones I've traditionally seen, it's kind of engine assets running, but not usually at higher fidelity than you would see in game. The one of the prime culprits of this sort of stuff is actually EA, who released kind of in-engine footage for Battlefield 5, if people remember, and stuff like that. And they also did the same for Battlefront 2. And whilst those games were spectacular looking, they certainly didn't look like the in-engine footage that they'd released. So I always take that with a big grain of salt. It doesn't really matter who says that. I'm kind of like, until I actually see that game running, I'm not going to believe it. If they do even manage to make it look close to that, it'll look incredible, though.
I hope so, because
it's not pre-rendered, doesn't it? I think, like,
is that what I mean?
You kind of got almost three phases. You've got gameplay, in-engine, and then CGI above that. If you take those as sort of the three levels of reveal often. So yeah, I think it's sort of not pre-rendered, not a CGI. If you compared it to, say, for example, the State of Decay 3's trailer, that was pure CGI, that was pre-rendered. I think Hellblade's would be a step beneath that, and then Halo Infinite was actual gameplay, I guess.
The only difficulty, I guess, with the Hellblade one was that it was running at 24 FPS apparently. So,
Was it?
right,
Oh, that's
okay.
proper.
which it blends credence to it more being some offline render than some kind of actual demonstration. But we'll see. We'll see. And I look. I mean, the original Hellblade looked incredible. And still does to this day, especially for the team size. So with additional resources and a bigger team, etc., I'm sure they will be able to make something that looks properly, quote unquote, next gen.
I hope so, and I can't remember who said it now in the chat. Thank you, chat, all for being it. It's fantastic already. But I think it was Shizno Elite saying I'm sure they're having to wait for Unreal 5 engine to be ready, which is taking a little while. But also, not only that, we've got all of the DirectX 12 Ultimate upgrades coming as well. Being able to shift data around very quickly and things, and streaming assets in and out very quickly as well. So there's lots of goodness to come. Pucks, let's come to you next, if you don't mind. Should we go through the chat first? How are we with the chat before we move on too far?
Yeah, so I've got a few comments I can read out, actually, just to make sure we're up to date. So going way back to the beginning when we were talking about what games we've been playing, Warlocky71 said here that my backlog is huge and never ending. Just play what I feel like at the time. I still buy stuff as well, despite this.
That's interesting. What was the last? Okay, Luke, what was the last Xbox game you bought?
Oh God.
Yeah,
the last one. Oh, it was Watch Dogs Legion, which I probably for 10 minutes.
Well, I guess for me, it's technically Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which came with my Xbox in the first place.
Yeah, Scott.
I genuinely cannot remember. It would have been Outriders until it came to Game Pass, so I had to cancel the pre-order there.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, what game was it? It might have been maybe FIFA.
Wow.
I bought, I think I bought FIFA before Christmas. But when it was in sale, it's been a little while. A lot of the games that I purchase outright are Switch games rather than Xbox games these days.
Mine was Valhalla as well, but I think that is a testament to Game Pass, isn't it? That we're all struggling to remember the last game we actually spent actual money on, actual hard-earned cash. And to be honest, that's part of topic 3, I believe, coming up later, which I'm really excited to delve into. But it is a testament to Game Pass, isn't it? About that. But let's carry on then. Pucks, what else have we got in the chat?
Yeah, another one here from Marion the Mad, who says that my backlog is full. I plan on starting the Metro series, finishing Far Cry 3, and starting Resident Evil 7.
Anyone excited for Metro Exodus with the next-gen bells and whistles? I am. I think that looks fantastic.
Already there, and I can tell you it's pretty special.
Yeah, was that on your new card or on the 2080 Ti?
That was on my new card because I downloaded it again specifically to check it out.
Just out of interest, you got 3080. Is there much of a difference between the 2080 Ti and the 3080 that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's pretty significant. It gets even more significant when you start to run ray tracing. So when you're running ray tracing in anything, the performance
Are we talking frames per second difference?
Yes, it's pretty massive. So, for example, Cyberpunk, as an example, I can get Ultra on that with DLSS on, of course, at 4K with all the ray tracing at the max settings, and you can get about 60 FPS out of that. So it's a pretty special experience, apart from it crashing all the time, of course.
Obviously. Sorry, Pucks.
That's all right. I've got a number more to go through, and more comments are coming in, which I'm storing as you guys are chatting. So I'll try and catch up. One here from Shizno Elite when you was talking about Hellblade and stuff. So they've just gone radio silent about Hellblade 2. Oh my god, I hate that I don't like having to wait years for a game to release. Wish they hadn't announced it when they did. I'm sure they're having to wait for Unreal 5. Sorry, you said that a minute ago. Tuka and Gula here says, itching to see the first Hellblade gameplay. Shizno Elite again says, Xbox have enough studios. They can afford to wait till games are a year out at the most to announce them. I don't even like them being announced 2 years to release. Marion the Mad again says, I just bought Rise of the Tomb Raider, Metro Exodus, and Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens Deluxe Edition. And finally, another one here from Shizno Elite who says, some gameplay would be nice, but after how Halo got skewered, I'm sure all Xbox devs are afraid to show anything because apparently a demo means final code now.
I think that extends to all devs, not just Xbox ones. Yeah, I think that particularly even indie game devs to a certain degree, if their game doesn't look like, the sort of, or perhaps not so much indie thinking about it, but yeah, if their final game doesn't quite look like the representations, then they get lambasted over it, don't they?
I've just seen another comment here, actually. I imagine to the chat in general, but I'm going to read it out. So Dragonmorph here has said, what are you expecting Flight Sim to run at on the Series X? 4K 30 down to maybe 1440, as it seems to be the new crisis in terms of pushing hardware.
Well, I think it's going to have dynamic resolution. At the very, very least, I don't think it will have... I don't think the PC version has ray tracing, does it? Sure.
No, it doesn't. No, I think it's a feature they want to introduce, but it's not there. I mean, I would think on Series X, I mean, there's two things. One, there's no way that game's running at 60 on anything.
Oh, you don't think? No.
No, not a chance, because
not even with quite a severe dynamic resolution shift.
I mean, maybe with a severe dynamic res shift, but I'm talking about into the 1080p zone or maybe less to try and get it at a good setting. So even my rig has a job on to get it at 60. I have to turn down settings. So I would, and also you do not in any way need 60 FPS for that game. It's a simulation, so it's
that's true.
It's so I think probably, as you say, Flap, like some DRS, or it will be at 1440p 30.
In fact, Shizno Elite's just come back saying he's intrigued to know how it's going to perform on the Series S. Which,
I mean the big one, actually, the S is going to be super interesting, and both the consoles are, but the S is going to be more interesting because Flight Sim is really heavy on everything, but one thing it's absolutely crushing on is memory. So, I think on PC for ultra settings or high setting, it's recommended you have at least 32 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that and you play with, say, 16 and you're trying to push it too high, it will just crash. It will just not be able to cope. So on Series S, it's going to be super. I tell you what, it will be a really good indication of how powerful these consoles actually are.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, that is going to be a good yardstick, isn't it? And like you say, I think we could expect the resolution to top out at 720, perhaps on the Series S. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
imagine that topping out at 720 on the next gen console. It sounds wild when you say it like that. I imagine they'll want it to at least be 1080 if they can, either through obviously dynamic resolution through 30 FPS, and I imagine they'll scale down those like the texture quality and things like that to try and maintain
the shadows are just going to be big blocks.
I mean it's a bloody good looking game, so I imagine they could probably tone some things down to get it there. But it's going to be interesting. The wild thing is they're still looking into seeing if they can get an Xbox One version on that. I believe the last time they commented on it, they said they'd still like to bring it to Xbox One.
Xbox One, Flight,
which is a scary thought. Imagine what that'll look like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you ever seen 240p?
Yeah, I was going to say, have you seen those remakes of games where they take like Resident Evil 7 and they make it look like N64? It will essentially be like that on the Xbox One.
The Horizon Zero Dawn version, I think, remake of that looked amazing when they together right now. Like, it genuinely made me want to play it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Pucks. Let's just try and get back on topic. We've kind of wandered off wildly there. The chat's taken us down a little rabbit hole, which I quite enjoy, actually. Quite like that. But Pucks, what games are you looking forward to coming in these Xbox events? Then what do you think Xbox have still yet to show us gameplay wise? Do you think we're going to see anything from Fable or Perfect Dark? Because there was a rumour, there was a report that those games are still many years off yet, which a lot of people were questioning, particularly around Fable, because that's been in production for at least 3 years now. But what else do you think we might see at these events?
I don't know. I know in the past previous couple of months, there's been rumours that, about is Banjo-Kazooie getting another kind of chance at life again after the kind of failed attempt on the 360 with the Nuts and Bolts game, I think it was called. So if that is true, that'd be very interesting. Obviously, we know about the new Indiana Jones game. We haven't seen any gameplay for that yet, so quite interesting to see what they do with that, because I would like that to be, in my mind, for that particular game, I'd like that to play something similar to Uncharted.
Yeah.
Because I love those games. Like the story and as well as the gameplay and controls are fantastic. And in my mind, I can see an Indiana Jones game taking great form. With
I've got to be honest. Whenever I was playing Uncharted, whenever I was playing Uncharted, it was always like it was an Indiana Jones game anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, I've seen some comments that I think it's a while off. I mean, I agree. But to answer the question is, do I think I'll see anything? I'd like to think that those will be some ones I'd like to see gameplay for. Again, I agree that games like Fable and some of the others that you mentioned are. Well, it's easy to say I think they're a way off, but then we don't know anything of what are the holiday games for 2021. Like, we don't know what those really are yet. So I'd like to think that some of these, which we've seen at least teased to us, I'd like to think that there must be at least one which is set to be the Christmas seller. As much as
Halo, isn't it?
Well, Halo or Starfield.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I think we'll be lucky if we see anything other than Halo by the end of this year outside of Bethesda stuff. If you think of just sort of Xbox game studios, I think we'll be lucky if there's anything other than Halo. To be honest,
Starfield. I mean, Starfield's been rumored to be coming later in the year, perhaps.
Yeah, sorry, like I said, sort of outside of Bethesda, because that's a little bit of a wild card. And obviously, we've just seen Deathloop being delayed for PlayStation 5 by at least a couple of months. So, I think Halo's the big seller, and I'd actually be curious as to whether Microsoft actually wants to put anything else out alongside Halo. Are they happy just to have Halo as the one and only sort of this fall? Maybe have something like Psychonauts this summer and leave the rest.
I thought that about Starfield. It always seems strange that they were talking about Starfield and Halo launching in such close succession. I never thought that was perhaps quite a good strategy, to be honest, but perhaps I'm wrong.
I mean, another game I've spoken about quite a lot that I'm really looking forward to is a little game called Tunic, which obviously did the rounds with a mysterious tweet that went out the other day. Because I say mysterious because is it Finji, I think it is, that kind of publish under them, as well as the official Tunic Twitter channel. I mean, they never post anything. There's not probably a post a year, if that, if you're lucky. So when I saw that, I got very excited because it made me kind of think that, are they reinvigorating people's attention to the game because it's maybe almost done, or maybe that's coming out soon? I mean, I wish for that to come out. If it does come out this year, then I mean, I don't think a smaller game like Tunic, being almost like a small Zelda-like, is anything like Halo. I mean, so I'd argue they're not really competing against each other. They're two very different types of games, different scales of games. So again, I've got my fingers crossed, hoping for maybe an end-of-year release for a game like Tunic, but that is with holding my breath a lot there, because I still don't anticipate I'm going to see that for a while.
Well, it looks like it's gone gold. Wasn't that what the sort of little tweet was alluding to?
Well, not officially. A lot of people are saying that it's just a gold door that's in the game. I remember seeing past footage of the game which didn't have the gold door, so that's why I commented kind of tongue-in-cheek in a way, like, oh, has this gone gold, guys? Just as a bit of fun. But part of me was kind of a bit semi-serious in that, as that, is this a message, or is it just seems a bit too random to be just for the sake of it? But I don't know, companies do that. And again, This is a small game by one person, so maybe it's a case of just putting it back in people's minds again. And that's kind of what made me think that maybe it's coming sooner than maybe a lot of people potentially think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was quite symbolic, wasn't it? I don't think people could be lambasted for assuming that it had gone gold with that little GIF that was playing round and around. It did seem like that was symbolic of it going gold, perhaps. But there
were a few other comments along the comments on that tweet. A load of other people saying about, oh, what does this mean? Does this mean anything? And then obviously you just get the general, love this game, can't wait for it, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Maybe it was just for fun. But again, with these tweets, companies are having fun with it. You never know. That's kind of part of the surprise, I guess, for better or worse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Luke, the rumor that a huge AAA title is coming to Game Pass is still doing the rounds. Are we all assuming that this is Battlefield 6, or do we think it could be something else?
I think that's a good guess. I'm trying to think of other games kind of that fit that description that could feasibly come to Game Pass. Like the thing that throws me off about Battlefield 6 is that would EA be that generous? I mean, I know obviously money would change hands for that, but it just strikes me as EA wouldn't countenance that when they've got their own, Premier service on PC, admittedly, that they'll put it on as well.
Oh, and on Game Pass. I mean, it is EA plays on Game Pass, isn't it? So it's not a huge leap, perhaps.
Well, no, but not day and date EA games on Game Pass. It's
okay.
just the the historic service of EA Play. So I think it's called Premiere, isn't it, or something like that? The high tier on PC. So I don't know. The one that always stood out to me, if it launched this year, that would be kind of prime Game Pass bound in terms of a AAA game would be Dying Light 2. If it launched this year, I feel like that's the kind of game they would go for, because I think, Techland, with some of their troubles, etc., would, and given its, it may launch this year, it seems like it'd be a good fit for it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if Battlefield 6 comes to Game Pass, that's a fantastic get from Microsoft, and that will no doubt attract a number of new subscribers to that service. And I'd just be pleased with it to be able to get that game and not have to spend money on it, of course. But yeah, Dying Light as well. I'd be more excited for that, to be honest, because I was really looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely starting to ramp up this kind of AAA day and date Game Pass rhetoric, and I think they want to do that as much as possible in the next few months, because they don't have, until we presume until the holidays hit, right? They don't have first party stuff coming out, or at least the bigger first party stuff. So I think they want to get some stuff in and get people looking forward to these games coming and keep them invested, because X Games just around the corner and about to come into it. So I think it's interesting, but yeah, it's hard to know for sure what game it will be.
Yeah, it's definitely not Call of Duty, because it was rumored to be a first person, wasn't it? A big AAA first person. So obviously not Call of Duty or anything like that. But I guess because it's not Call of Duty, I think that might be one of the reasons, or one of the things that's fueling the Battlefield 6 kind of argument, in the fact that obviously Activision and Call of Duty have kind of aligned themselves to PlayStation, and so the sort of natural opposition to that would be Battlefield 6 on the Xbox. And obviously, the fact EA Play's already on Game Pass, it wouldn't perhaps be the huge bundle of cash down to have that on the service had EA Play not already been on there, I guess. But
I mean, I think that.
Go on, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say, I'm sure it will come to Game Pass eventually, because it will come to EA Play eventually and be vaulted. But I don't know whether that'll be day and date.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Scott, could it be an Ubisoft game?
Yeah, I think Battlefield 6 kind of makes sense. I think you maybe got to consider, right, what first-person shooters are going to be out by the end of this year. If we are, or if the rumors are sort of fixed on a AAA FPS, that really does narrow down the options, doesn't it? I mean, you've got something like maybe Far Cry 6, Back 4 Blood, Battlefield, really outside of those three, and Call of Duty, obviously, which as you rightly say, Fab, we can rule that out. Like, what other first-person shooters are likely to come? But I think the Battlefield 6 rumor, in my opinion, just kind of makes sense. I think there's a couple of key things. So I think the first one is obviously, well, more than likely, it won't come to Game Pass for PC, because as you mentioned there, look, you've got a EA Play Premier on PC, which obviously isn't available on consoles just yet. But on console, so there's a couple of big things. I think the first one is that Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 1 really were, as much as some people like those games, were, in my opinion, sort of, it showed the popularity of the Battlefield franchise really take a dip, especially in comparison to Call of Duty. And what Battlefield are going to be battling against this year is not just Call of Duty, Vanguard, or whatever apparently it's going to be called. It's still going to be Warzone. It's still going to be a free-to-play version of Call of Duty that is probably going to be more popular than whatever the full-price Call of Duty game comes out. So they're going to be competing with a free-to-play game, first and foremost. Secondly, EA, the most recent earnings call, really highlighted the boost that adding EA Play to Game Pass Ultimate had to EA Play subscriber numbers. So for every person that subscribes to Game Pass Ultimate to play Battlefield 6 on PC, there's another EA Play subscriber technically as well. So there is sort of a couple of benefits to them releasing. It's like they have microtransactions as well. And I think if they look at maybe the success that Outriders has had just this past week, I think they'd be looking at that, and that would probably be really promising to see, and would encourage them possibly to sign up if maybe they were umming and ahhing about it a little bit. I think seeing the success that, Outriders, as big as it was, it's a Square Enix published game. It doesn't have sort of the name recognition that a Battlefield game does, and I imagine that would be even bigger. So I think Battlefield just sort of makes sense out of all the ones that were out there, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like you say, when you take into account all of the other things that are going around, like you say, it's definitely not Call of Duty. EA and Xbox seem to be playing nicely together at the moment. Yeah. It does make sense. Although, I see Luke's point that, perhaps it is a little bit too much of a step, and do EA, because, let's face it, Battlefield 6 isn't a highly monetized or in-game monetized game, is it? So, it's not like they're going to get it on Game Pass and make a chunk of money back through in-game purchases, unless they've highly monetized it, perhaps. Hope not, but you never know. Pux, how are we doing? Are we caught up with the chat and everything?
Yes, that's the chat so far.
Okay, so, we've got quite a few, events still to come. I think there's still some hardware to show off. I know we've kind of had this discussion before, but I'm just wondering if perhaps this is the year that we might actually start to see Xbox and people like LG and Samsung partner up to have Game Pass app on the TVs that are coming out, and also perhaps the Game Pass stick that, obviously a little HDMI stick that plugs in. Do you think we might start seeing stuff like that this year, or at least perhaps hear of the vision going forwards with regards getting Game Pass onto more devices?
Speaking of devices in general, I'm not going to be talking about quite Game Pass here, but you just jogged my memory, because I think it might have been about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, there was a trailer for a game coming out for PlayStation VR. I think it was called like Toy Soldiers or Toy Factory or something like that. You're almost like a Geppetto with wooden toys on a table kind of thing, and it's the whole trailer is in VR. But then what I found interesting was that there was also a trailer for the game for Xbox on the official Xbox channel, and it was the same VR trailer. And it kind of made me think, well, the game is very much a VR game. Is this almost like an under-the-cuff sign of VR somehow coming to Xbox? Or is it just a mistake on the developer's part for making a VR trailer for Xbox when there's no VR headset? That really threw me off. It was a couple of weeks ago that was, but it's got me wondering if, outside of Game Pass stuff, as you originally mentioned, I'm wondering if has a VR been alluded to is kind of what's in my mind as well. So I'm kind of interested to see hardware-wise what comes out regarding that.
Well, they've had their AR glasses around for a long time, haven't they? They've always looked really intriguing.
Yeah, the AR stuff, but yeah, but VR specifically.
What's the AR for Microsoft called? I can never
HoloLens.
HoloLens, that's it. I keep thinking of what was the Google one? Was that HoloGlass or something?
It was just called Google Glass, I think,
Google
wasn't
Glass. It? Yeah. No, that HoloLens always looks pretty intriguing. But do you think we're going to see a Series Elite 3 controller this year?
You're asking me, sorry?
Yeah.
I'll be surprised if not. I mean, I can definitely see them put in the extra capabilities that they put into the base kind of Series X or the Series controller into a new Elite 3. It make with the advent of things like the share button and a few extra stuff. And if anything, it's more the hardware level, isn't it? Like the increased or rather decreased latency times between input and the game being registered and stuff. So I think it would be minor. It's mainly going to be those kind of optimizations of the controller, so to speak, as opposed to new features, is what I would imagine. But I'd like to think, though, they might announce a Series 3 controller at some point. It makes perfect sense in my mind. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, exactly. And it feels about the time that they would do that. I mean, I think Xbox's hardware division are on fire at the moment, if I'm honest. I know the headphones I think most people give them kind of 4 out of 5 stars. I think that's kind of the average of what people have been giving them because, bang for your buck's really good. Not the best quality in the world, but certainly good quality stuff. Luke, is there any other hardware that you think we might start to see this year or perhaps, some vision of the future coming on? Because let's face it, Xbox are far from finished. They're still going and they've alluded to stuff in the future that we still haven't really heard about. Like I say, the TV apps for Game Pass and the potential sort of Game Pass stick. Do you think we might start seeing a little more detail around that?
I think you'll definitely start to see more details around their app integration with the manufacturers, etc. I think that's that's kind of, to me, that's the next natural evolution of where they're taking Game Pass and getting it onto as many platforms as possible, if you want to call TV apps a platform. So I think you will definitely see some of that. I don't think they will make a huge big deal out of it. I think it will be probably kind of beta applications this year or something like that, going like building towards proper releases. So, but it'll still be it'll be cool. I don't know about a stick. I just can't see the overall use case for one. I mean, it may be that for some people that's quite useful, but I think if especially nowadays, if you're buying a modern TV, they tend to all have integrated smart features, and that you can easily get an Xbox app on that. It wouldn't be that difficult. So I don't know if there's a use case for them to put into hardware development that kind of product. Maybe perhaps there is.
Can I add to that? Because I think there is a use case, if you don't mind me saying.
Go on.
Because mainly from my parents' point of view, actually, because they've got like in a spare room just like a really small TV, which it's not a smart TV at all. Yeah, obviously they use things like an Amazon Fire Stick, which just putting a small HDMI dongle in, the TV becomes smart out of nowhere. So I'm wondering if a Game Pass stick has a use case for that, almost that same type of thing. But I agree, like if you've got a smart TV, then there's no point. But I'm wondering if there is a use case for those that can't afford a decent smart TV with enough processing power, or you put all that processing power on a stick potentially for older TVs, maybe.
I guess so, but even that is a really niche market, right? You especially now where if you went back, say, 10 years ago, right, when smart TVs were in their infancy, and you're saying, okay, we're building up these platform features, etc. But not everybody has one of these, much in the same way, right, that 4K TVs, years and years ago were not the standard, right? But now, like and I get, like, not everybody's going to upgrade their TV, right? And that's by the by. Not everyone can afford to do that, and so that stick, I guess, might be useful for those people. But in a market now, I think it's like 4K. It can be quite hard to find a TV that isn't a smart TV, that doesn't have smart TV platform features, because it's just become such a ubiquitous part of how we watch television and what we use. Like, if you try and find a Samsung TV that has no smart features, I don't know if you could do it in any normal market. So much in the same way that 4K it's like hard to, almost impossible to find a 1080p television now, right? So I think maybe it is, and maybe it's something that Microsoft would look towards putting into production, not for the markets that we're kind of interested in per se, but perhaps markets where smart TVs just aren't commonplace because people can't afford them. So I'm thinking countries outside of UK, US, the Americas, that sort of thing. So it might be that it's something for those markets more than ours, but I'd still be surprised.
Yeah, I think I've given this a little bit of thought, actually, and one area that I wondered if maybe there was a use case for a stick outside of just availability of using the app directly on a smart TV is the app itself will obviously need a certain amount of processing power, I assume. Is are the apps, or is the hardware within a TV good enough? That might sound like a silly question. I'm honestly not too sure. I've got an NVIDIA Shield that I plug into my TV, so even though it's got the smart features, I don't actually use any of them because I've got everything on the NVIDIA Shield. But I do wonder whether maybe it has the ability to.
Well,
I don't
I
know.
think the only
process
the only sort of processing I think that a TV would need to do is obviously the incoming stream, and they would all have pretty tasty decoders in there because they're obviously
True.
decoding YouTube and all of those sort of things. The one thing that they might not quite have, and I don't think it would be too hard to implement, is obviously the upstream with the commands from your controller to the TV that it then obviously passes back up to the servers. I don't know if TVs currently have that level of sort of connectivity to external devices other than a remote, as it were, but that that wouldn't be hard or expensive to implement. I wouldn't have thought. But
the only extra thing I can then think of as to why you'd have a dongle is purely for the Bluetooth functionality for your controller, because I mean, I could be wrong here, but do all smart TV, well, cheap ones, I guess, do they all have built-in Bluetooth as well?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. So that would be my only, unless I'm wrong, of course, but that would be my only real thing I can think of.
Well, there's many versions of Bluetooth as well. I think we're up to at least 5, aren't we? I can't even remember what Bluetooth version we're up to now. But
I know it was at least 4.2. I think was the last.
Think you can get up to 5.1 these days as well. So the controller actually really is an interesting point of conversation because a Bluetooth connection, I believe, adds maybe a slight bit of additional latency compared to just the wireless tech between an Xbox and a controller is my understanding of it. I don't think it's necessarily much, but in the streaming capacity where you're getting the latency of the stream plus the latency of then Bluetooth and then back to the servers, I do wonder whether that's something that Microsoft are considering doing, where rather than it being Bluetooth pucks, it's actually just the same wireless connection between an Xbox console and a controller rather than Bluetooth being included in the stick itself. But I do actually wonder whether Microsoft would consider going down the Luna or Stadia route of actually releasing an Xbox controller with Wi-Fi built in that connects directly to the xCloud servers in the same way that Stadia and Lunas do, because that does seem to eliminate at least some of the latency that goes on in a streaming capacity.
You know what, Scott? I think if they were going to do that, they would have done that with the release of the Series X controllers. I think they're obviously that forward-looking that they would have perhaps implemented that in this. We never know. They might already have done that. That might be a capability in these new controllers that they haven't divulged yet, perhaps. But I don't think they would release a new console and then within perhaps 8 months you have to then buy another controller to because the one thing Xbox are very good at the moment of being kind of consumer friendly and one device kind of fits all kind of thing. But like I say, perhaps the new controllers do have a Wi-Fi capability. We're just not aware of it yet because they haven't switched it on with a sort of a firmware patch. Perhaps that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and imagine it increases the hardware costs as well. So you've got Xbox Wireless, you've got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi in the controllers. I wonder if there's an element of cost that they've got to factor in with that. I'm sure obviously it's not massively expensive, but obviously they'll be trying to keep the cost down as much as possible. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see a revision with Wi-Fi included. That's maybe slightly more expensive, which is advertised as sort of the xCloud controller, simply because, like I say, if the Luna and Stadia solution is the best solution for latency, then I'm sure Microsoft will want to do something similar, because if they're trying to make the xCloud experience as close to, they're never going to get there as sort of a home console experience, then having that latency be as small as they possibly can get it will be quite important, because latency is the main drawback to streaming games at the moment. So anything that they can do to reduce that as much as possible, i.e., Wi-Fi controllers, and I'm sure that's something that they might look into. But I agree, it is something that they might have considered, including the Series X controller, and they may have, if they were going to, they may have already put it in. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But wow, what a first topic that was. That went on a lot longer than I was expecting, and that's great, because obviously the chat's been throwing us a few curveballs as well. And there's been a lot of chat actually around the Series S and its capabilities and DirectX 12 Ultimate. Perhaps we need to do a topic on that, guys, because that did kind of light them up. And perhaps we need to do a topic on the Series S and how it's going to handle some of these more graphically intensive games going forwards, and perhaps Flight Simulator is the example or yardstick of that. But so perhaps that could be a topic for future. And thank you very much, chat. You've given me that idea. Chat, you've been fantastic. We've got so many great people in the chat already. Indie Gamer, Warlocky, Tukungulu, She's No Elite, Dragon Wolf. I'm going to miss so many people. I do apologise. Wakanda Xbox News Today. Stubbs Gaming, thank you for being here. In fact, Stubbs Gaming is one of the reasons we are doing our second topic, strangely enough. We've been having lots of healthy debate on our Discord server, and anyone who's in the chat that's not part of the Discord server, the GPG Discord server, please, I encourage you to join. There should be an invite in the description below on YouTube. Come along and have a chat, because in between our podcasts, we don't do one every day, as people know. We only kind of do one podcast a week at this moment in time, but we do carry on the chat, and it's great to see some of the healthy chat in our Discord server, and that's actually led to our second topic. So let's go straight into that. And it is actually a topic we've covered before, and I'll come to you first, Pucks, if that's okay. And the topic is, has Xbox changed the gaming landscape forever? This kind of came out of some discussion around PlayStation and some of their sort of decisions that's been going on at the moment. And this isn't really about sort of PlayStation in general, but this is about Xbox and what it is that they're doing that is kind of shaping the gaming landscape. There's been lots of discussions about Sony's response, if there will be one, if there won't be one, and all of those sort of things. But Pucks, do you think Xbox, the aggressiveness is actually a good thing for the gaming industry, because they've been flashing a big ton of cash around? Does that ultimately benefit the gaming landscape in general, do you think, or could it actually have a negative impact?
It's definitely a great thing for Microsoft, I think it's fair to say, but whether or not it's great for the general gaming landscape, I'm not sure. Thinking about it, I guess what the aggressiveness kind of shows is almost what you can do if you do become aggressive and try to go out and reach for these things which seem impossible. I know we've spoken about it loads of different times, but still, I mean, this time last year, that even the concept of Xbox buying out Bethesda and all the subsidiaries for 7.5 billion you'd get laughed at, wouldn't you? I mean, you'd think, what you're talking about, what pills you've been taking. But but now that it's all kind of happened, and as you say, heard about things like Discord, it's definitely a good thing in terms of what is possible to happen in the future. But in terms of the negatives, I think there are a number of people online, and I've had this thought myself as well, actually, about if these big companies become too aggressive. If you, as your solo indie or a small company that are trying to make it big, trying to make a living from making games, for example, if you want to become bigger than just like a small-time game developer, but then there's the potential that you're going to be bought out or eaten up by a big company. We've kind of had this before. Like, does that potentially? Do you become a monopoly? And if so, is that a bad thing? I know we've had this chat before. I think it was more healthy at that point in time, but the more we do read about the potential acquisitions from Microsoft and what else could happen, it does make me wonder sometimes as to, is it going to get to a point? Well, I'll take a step back, actually, because I'm aware that a lot of the regulators and stuff wouldn't allow it to happen if those companies did become a monopoly in the event they was to buy XYZ companies. But it doesn't mean that people won't question it, and that might not necessarily be the best face you want as your public image at that point in time, if you get what I mean. But the other side of the coin, though, what I think it has shown is what good it can be for the consumer. We see, for us on Xbox that love Game Pass, Microsoft's aggressiveness in acquiring Bethesda, as well as all these other companies, and pushing for even the smaller indie titles, which they're paying for to be on the service. It's great for us because we get to play all of these titles for our monthly subscription, no extras, no less. So, and I know on the other side of the fence in the PlayStation camp, I mean, this is part of, I think, what you was talking about with the healthy debate we had on Discord, because I know Stubbs and I had a bit of a chat regarding PlayStation Now, because PlayStation Now originally came out as solely a cloud service in 2015. Yet, in my opinion, that hasn't been marketed very well at all, because I think a lot of people, especially in the earlier days, just completely dismissed it, especially for the price it cost, actually. I read about 2 or 3 days ago that it was actually due to the advent of Game Pass only being $10.99 that the PlayStation Now price got dropped from about £18 a month to £8.99 a month, I believe, or it was something like that. It was a massive price drop to try to make it competitive, which I did find interesting. But the level of games which are on the server, or the types of games, I guess, well, they're very hit and miss in my opinion. You've got a lot of JRPGs and those kind of titles. So if you're a big fan of those, then you're going to love life there because there's all sorts. But I know there's also been a lot of debate on Sony's side about Sony's seemingly lack of preservation of their legacy of titles. I know it's easy for a lot of people to say that who cares about old titles? We don't want to play them. We're not interested. They've kind of had their day. But I know there's also a lot of even indie developers. I mean, going back to PSX graphics seems to be a new aesthetic that's coming out in the indie sphere, and indie developers are pulling off the look very well. So I do wonder if Sony to compete with something like Game Pass and for them to be aggressive would be mainly to try to support your legacy on this cloud platform. I know their hardware architecture doesn't support it, which is unfortunate, outside of PS4, of course. But there's no reason, I can't see any logical reason why you can't emulate PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 3 via the cloud. I mean, there are PS2 and PS3 titles on the PS Now service. In fact, there's actually a lot of PS3 titles, but I know a load of people would love to see PlayStation 1 stuff on there, myself included, actually. So if anyone needs to be aggressive, I think Sony should be aggressive. Oh, maybe not aggressive, but I think they need to be a bit more upfront and forthcoming about what they should be doing, in my opinion, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense. No, it does make sense. And perhaps we'll come to you with this then, Scott, because obviously, we know Microsoft have the bank balance. They've got very, very deep pockets. We know this, and to the extent where they can actually just purely do stuff that Sony physically or financially can't do. And they're actually exercising that muscle. And like I say, from an Xbox fan perspective, that's a great thing. But actually, in the landscape of gaming, are they actually crushing, that aspect of Sony and actually, making it almost impossible to even try and compete with Game Pass to a certain degree? And if that's the case, then I'm not convinced that's a healthy thing, because I think one of the things that came out of the Discord discussion is that, not so much Nintendo, but Sony and Microsoft find themselves in this sort of symbiosis of where they kind of need each other really to be able to push and innovate like that. And it's nearly always the underdog that innovates. But at the moment, Microsoft are being so aggressive around that. It just, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for Sony to keep up in terms of financials anyway. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the financial side of things is obviously one aspect of it where, Sony won't unfortunately be able to compete with Xbox, or more specifically Microsoft. They just don't have the backing of $1 trillion company. Sony's big, but it's not that big. But I think in terms of Game Pass, I think obviously, so Microsoft are getting a lot of good press now. Sony are maybe not getting an awful lot of good press. Some of the recent things with PS Now, PS Plus, the most recent news about that came up from Jason Schreier fairly recently. Yeah. But I don't think it would take an awful lot for Sony to catch up, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think
fair enough.
They just need to have the appetite. Appetite's not the right word. They've obviously got the appetite to make money, and they've obviously got appetite to make it successful. What Microsoft are doing with their aggression, in my opinion, is absolutely good for the industry. Competition is good for us as consumers. And that's what it comes down to. In a world where PlayStation doesn't have Microsoft being as aggressive as they are, is not a good world for us as gamers and consumers of games, because, well, maybe as we've seen already a little bit, that may lead to things like complacency, and maybe there's a little element of that with Jason's reporting recently. And Microsoft are pushing and pushing and pushing, but they're still not bigger than Sony in the gaming landscape just yet. Now, in my opinion, if Sony came out with a Game Pass equivalent, where it was all first-party games day and date, whether it be in PS Now or maybe a third service that they offer, I think that instantly would potentially, I know obviously Microsoft would state they've got 300 games, but PS Now, so let's say they use PS Now, they've got 800 games or something in there at the moment. Now, let's say they came out with an announcement on Monday that said, right, PS Now has 800 games. It's also got all of our PS4 and PS5 first-party games in there available to download, and any future games will go in there day one. So Last of Us 2, Spider-Man, Demon Souls, Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, they're all coming to PS Now day and date. I think that would be bloody massive, and I think Microsoft would start, excuse my language, but shitting themselves if Sony did that, because the one thing that Sony have that Microsoft don't currently, in my opinion, is a track record in releasing quality first-party AAA games. That's the bit that's the last piece of Microsoft's puzzle, in my opinion, that Sony have got.
Yeah, that's still yet to be fulfilled. I agree.
Yeah. And if Sony countered with that announcement, which it doesn't sound like they're going to do, because, I mean, they've spoken about how it's maybe not sustainable for them. I mean, that might change in the future, admittedly. We've spoken about that recently. But the day that happens, that's going to be great for us as Xbox consumers as well, because Microsoft are going to have to get even more aggressive to make sure that their service is at least equal, if not better, than whatever PlayStation offer. And I think that's basically what they do in the moment. That's the whole point in the Bethesda acquisition. They want to make sure that their services are where you can play first-party, exclusive games.
But if that's the case, then, Scott, and I do agree, but the trouble is with Sony, and they are doing some very peculiar moves at the moment, and perhaps they'll prove me wrong, but why haven't they put MLB, the show 21 straight onto PS Now then? Why would they hold back from that, seeing as Game Pass is doing that? That seems, seems a very simple fix that they could implement straight away almost, and they just don't seem to be.
So I think the answer is actually fairly straightforward, Flap, and the answer is Game Pass has 18 million plus subscribers. PS Now has 2 million plus subscribers. I believe the last time they announced it was maybe 2 million. Please correct me if I'm wrong, chat, by the way. I think that's how I remember it. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. They release it in PS Plus. They've only got a potential user base of 2 million. They release it in Game Pass. They've got instantly a user base of 20 plus million, more likely at this stage. So I think that's what it comes down to. But also, Microsoft made the commitment a long time ago that they were going to put all their eggs in a Game Pass-sized basket. And Sony aren't ready to make that commitment at this point. And I imagine the reason is purely financial. I always have this sort of image in my head of just Jim Ryan looking at a spreadsheet that shows the countless millions and millions of dollars that they make from game sales. And at this point, the only thing I can think is those figures just don't add up where it makes sense for them to be putting these games in these types of services, because that's $70 that in theory they're losing out on for each person that doesn't buy MLB because they're subscribing to PS Now, and they seem to be more focused on those sort of one-off sales rather than on the services side of things, and where Microsoft seems to be on the opposite side.
Yeah, but I guess the bigger picture is if I guess that makes sense for people that only have a PlayStation 5, but for people that do have multiple consoles, then Sony are missing out on that $70 from those people because it's on Game Pass. So I don't know if it quite stacks up, but I'm sure it does. I'm like I say, I'm sure they've done the numbers. Lots of people are in the chat saying it's all about the money and stuff, but Sony aren't broke. Luke, do you think it's healthy for sort of Microsoft to start swinging their financial clout around? Is that bad for gaming in general in the long run if it goes too far?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's very healthy for competition. It's something that, look, let's be honest, Microsoft, or at least Xbox, really needed to do that. They came into this generation with an astonishingly small first-party collective, essentially boiling down to what Mojang, Coalition, 343, and Turn 10. I think that was pretty much it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And all of those focusing on core franchises, and they needed to change that. And it was through this kind of transformation into focusing on their gaming division as more of a service center than kind of platform agnostic to some extent. That they've now done that, and it's not bad for the industry at all that they've done that. It's only going to benefit it because, as people have said, and I totally agree with pretty much everything that Scott says, that Microsoft were not in a particularly good place, and that kind of forced them. They really got quite hammered by Sony at the start of last gen and all through it essentially, and that forced them to adopt this way that their way. I think Shizno Elite said, and I totally agree, which is that they've, much like Nintendo, right, Microsoft have found their own way, and it works. But you need first parties to fund that and to keep people invested in it. And for Microsoft, it's going to be really difficult to grow. It was always going to be impossible to grow their current teams, so the ones that they came into last gen with, because they were already pretty big, but they were just kind of focused on these specific titles, and they needed to expand, and they needed to expand aggressively. And that's only good for us, because it means, first of all, that you have lots of talented developers, lots of talented studios making games with not unlimited funding, because nobody has unlimited funding, but with incredibly comfortable budgets, etc., and able to retain creative control about what they make. And if you didn't, you would end up with a situation where Microsoft may have perhaps not wanted to exit the gaming space, but really toned down their focus on it. And what's happened is you've had the other side of that. So we can all see what happens when platform holders become complacent or don't react or give people what they want. And I mean, we had the exact same thing 2 generations ago, where Sony came out with a lot of tone deaf decisions for the PlayStation 3, and it cost them that generation greatly. I mean, they ended up just about by the end of it, or just after it, being the number one console seller, apart from the Wii. But it took that kind of for Sony, that kind of battering for them to come back with arguably their greatest generation yet in the PlayStation 4, right? So and it's the same with Microsoft this time, and the only way to countenance that kind of hit that they've had is to sometimes spend money. I mean, you have to spend money, So Sony are doing it now in a different way, where they're going out trying to get Forspoken and Final Fantasy 16 and the timed exclusive deals for Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. Like, all of these things are them recognizing that they need to remain competitive, and whether they.
But that is absolutely the crux of my point, though, Luke, because I guess it's all very well having your first party studios, and let's, for argument's sake, let's say Xbox and Sony's first party studios are what they are. The real difference, other than the first party studios, it could come down to the third party studios and nabbing a game on your system made by a third-party studio, so it's not on the other platform, if that makes sense. So I guess my point is, obviously Microsoft have a much larger bank balance to be able to do that with, if you see what I'm saying. So does that instantly put Sony at a disadvantage, do you think? Because they were both in discussions around having Starfield. Sony wanted it as an exclusive, and Microsoft went and bought Bethesda. You see the difference in scale. Assuming that's true, assuming that they both, wanted that, then but equally, what kind of similar deals, apart from say MLB, which is on Game Pass, right, or coming to Game Pass? Sony have gone out this gen and they've locked down exclusivity for Final Fantasy 16, which for 2 years at least. Which no doubt will have cost a substantive amount of money. Forspoken, again, would have cost a lot of money. 1 year time deals for Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop would have cost a lot of money. I don't think Kena, I mean, I'm sure that some money exchanged hands to keep that off. Probably not that great an amount compared to the others, but I don't think really Microsoft has done anything in terms of locking down a third party or second party kind of game to that extent yet. And I think there was a report, I
I think even maybe Jason Schreier talked about it way back when at the start of this gen, which was that it's not as if Microsoft weren't willing to do that, and he'd heard that Microsoft were going out trying to court those kind of deals. But funnily enough, and I'm almost certain this is correct, he said that Microsoft just weren't willing to pay the amount of money that was being banded around for this sort of stuff. In fact, it might have been Imran Khan from Game Informer, who's quite reliable.
Well, they've done a couple, haven't they? I mean, they did the Medium and I guess Crossfire X. I mean, there are a few out there.
There are a few, yeah. I wouldn't say any. You know, if you take let's take the yardstick as Final Fantasy 16, which is a huge AAA. Nothing on that side. So, and that's not because Microsoft don't have the money to do. I mean, clearly they have. You know, as an entity, they have more. They have more cash than Sony does. They can afford to go and do this sort of stuff, but they just didn't want to. And I suspect part of that reason is because, you know, they wanted to focus on their first party and bolstering that. You know, that's the weakness for Microsoft. It has been for a generation, and you know, get that sorted first, and then you can go out and look to do these aggressive deals, right?
But that's a strange thing. But we discussed this on last week's show, isn't it? In the absence of these big first-party titles come from Microsoft, I'm surprised they haven't gone out and nabbed some of these third-party exclusivity deals just to sort of bridge the gap, almost.
Yeah, that we know of. I mean, they may have done something like that, you know, in the background, but you know, they haven't announced that sort of stuff yet. So. You know, I mean, either way, you know, if you're particularly if you're a multi-platform gamer and you see what Microsoft are doing and you see what Sony are doing, not in terms of, you know, let's forget about the fact they don't have a Game Pass equivalent at the moment, etc. But in terms of attractive content for that platform, if you own that platform, right? You know, they're both being pretty aggressive with what they do. You know, they're both spending money to get you into their ecosystem, whether that's, you know, the broad one that Microsoft have or the more kind of, you know, PlayStation centric one that Sony have. So, and it only benefits us at the end of the day. And Microsoft doing Game Pass ultimately, you know, will put different kinds of pressures on Microsoft, on Sony, sorry, to do different things. Now, whether they do day and date kind of PS Now sort of stuff is a different matter, but certainly, you know, it is going to push them to do things like, you know, bigger games on PlayStation Plus and, you know, the PS Plus collection and all that sort of stuff, which for Sony is quite a big deal because they don't usually, you know, they're not usually that generous, right? So even that
they don't need to be, do they? It's going to be interesting for Sony to get a bloodied nose and to be the underdog for once, just to see what their response is to that and how they're going to innovate themselves out of that situation, perhaps.
Yeah, and I mean, I think. Yeah, the underdog in terms of like the Game Pass style service, right, and adopting that. I think Sony are fine. You know, this generation, I don't think they're going to struggle at all. But
you say that. I mean, they nearly quit after the PS3 era, and obviously Xbox nearly quit after the Xbox One. You know what I mean? You know, it doesn't take much to rock the boat.
Yeah, things can change, but I think you know they. I think both platform holders are in a position now where they're pretty comfortable with the direction they're heading. Probably Microsoft more than Sony. I think Microsoft are clear that they're going to be a service, you know, a service company, and their gaming is going to be service based, and that's what they're going to do from now on. You'll never see a role reversal of that. I think Sony are in this kind of position where they've got I don't think they have any compelling reason right now to adopt that approach because their games sell extremely well. They make a lot of money from them. They make an inordinate amount of money from PlayStation Plus subscriptions. And, you know, the sooner the semiconductor shortage is over and the sooner they get consoles into people's hands, you know, they'll be doing even better. But there may come a day, you know, later in the generation where that starts to fall away for Sony. I doubt it, but it's possible. You know, as nobody would have expected I certainly didn't expect the 360 to be the runaway success that it was coming from Xbox, right? Which was kind of, it was successful, but not massively so because it was their first entrance into the market. So, you know, things can change, and you know, competition through how Microsoft are doing it through the service, but also, you know, just bolstering their first party, you know, getting people to invest in their ecosystem doesn't just benefit that ecosystem; it benefits everybody else because it means that Sony and Nintendo, to some lesser extent, have to respond in some way. They have to do something to make their ecosystem more attractive, whether that's through a new service or exclusive deals for games on their platform or bolstering their own first parties, you know, which they've all done, right? They've all done in the last 6 months. Even Nintendo, you know, bought a developer. So, I think it's great for everyone.
Yeah, no, I think that the gaming media and press have got a lot of influence over people, more so than perhaps a lot of people would perhaps either admit or realise. Particularly this sort of the mid tier of gamers, the casuals, and I think that's certainly what damaged the Xbox One in that era. And I'm just witnessing. I don't know if anyone else is seeing it on YouTube, but there's lots of negative press around Sony at the moment. And to be fair to Sony, I think people are assuming they're being arrogant, where actually what they're being is just silent at the moment. I think they're doing this thing where they're waiting for Microsoft to perhaps make a mistake or have to perhaps increase the price of Game Pass or something, and then Sony will claim sort of a mild victory over that, perhaps, that they're playing the quiet game at the moment. Pucks, I'm conscious we've got lots of chat to get through. The chat's been fantastic on this one. Where are we with the chat?
Yes, I've got a lot of stuff to go through. Again, timestamps a bit backwards, but
that's fine.
They're all still relevant, to be fair, so I'll try to bring them back on point. I got one here from Tuka and Gurla, who says Microsoft's definitely changing the landscape in a positive way. Think about the positives to developers who would have otherwise struggled with marketing and developmental costs.
I think Game Pass, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Shizo Elite says, unfortunately, PS Now just feels like an afterthought to me. If they made it a priority, it could be great. One here from Dragonwolf, who says, Discord link doesn't open to the server. We might have to correct that, just to bear in mind.
Oh, that's interesting.
We might have to refresh the link there. Thanks for that, Dragonwolf. We'll get that sorted.
Time out. Yep, no worries. Thank you.
Wandering Dutch. This is regarding PS Now. Wasn't worth it. More than half of the games on PS Now are streaming only, which is stuck at 720p. Warlocky71. I think devs just want to be able to make games without too much interference from their publisher if they are bought out. But there's always going to be indie games pushing innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tukugura again says, mid-tier development teams will now be able to creatively focus a lot more on their projects without worrying about certain costs. This will only serve to raise the bar on the quality of games.
I can't remember who posted it in our Discord channel now, but they posted the Destin video that I actually kind of referenced in last week's podcast, where he was sort of talking about the various financial deals on the table for all game devs, but probably particularly indie game devs, because they probably struggle to raise the finances to a certain degree. And like I say, one of the deals on the table was that Microsoft, would potentially pay their entire development costs in return for their game being on the Game Pass. And obviously, if there's any in-game transactions, microtransactions or anything like that, or if it was a timed exclusive, any money they made on microtransactions or on any other platform once the exclusivity deal was up would be the devs. So it's a win-win. It is a good method.
Yeah, definitely. I'll continue. Sorry, so another one here from Wakanda Xbox News Today, who says, but Sony done the throw money to kill the comp with Sega. There is a double standard from people out there. Brackets not here regarding this community.
Yeah, bless him. I think Sega were as much their own problem as Sony were. I think Sony just put in the final nail, to be honest. I think Sega had many internal problems, particularly between the Japanese and the American division of Sega.
Yeah.
So that's a story in its own right.
A comment here from Tavish Hill, making a Game Pass. Yes, welcome. I've not seen this name before. I hope you're enjoying it. So, making a Game Pass competitor requires paying heaps of cash to pubs/devs up front, in addition to buying up exclusives left and right. Sony does not have the resources to do that.
Yeah, that was kind of the essence of my question. But like Luke said, they are going out and doing stuff, so it's not that they're not doing anything, I guess.
Yeah, and I think as Scott was saying as well regarding this one, it's not like Sony don't have like a base to work off of. I mean, PS Now, I think, is a good base they could leverage. It's just they just need to do it, I think, is the the main thing, isn't it? Another one here from Tuku and Gula, who says, best part, it is Microsoft. Sorry, I'll start again. Best part, it is Microsoft aren't forcing devs to lock their games to Game Pass. This means devs will no longer be making a saving from partnering up with Game Pass, but have the option to bring the game to other platforms.
Yep.
Judezilla Music here says, if Sony puts, this is regarding MLB, if Sony put it on PS Now, everyone that was going to buy it will sign up to play it for less. those subs will stay over time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah. Like I say, if they were to put MLB on PS Now, then you might find that they increase their subs to it. I guess, which, okay, it might not be the short term game, but it could be the long term game, which is obviously what Microsoft are playing.
Yeah. Again, continuing from that, actually, another one here from Warlocky71 who says, if Sony did first party day and date, do they have the infrastructure to pull this off for streaming, which is for the future? Microsoft have spent hundreds of billions on cloud infrastructure. Another one here from Wakanda Xbox News today. Sony seem to have that. Sony seem to have that I want it now mentality for cash, and maybe looking at a Sony Game Pass soon. But from the vibes, they are not, and this is damaging them to a degree.
Yeah, there is rumours that there is a Game Pass counter coming on the PlayStation platform. Be interesting to see what it is and what form that takes. I get the feeling
definitely.
It's nothing to do with PS Now. I think it's going to be something new and in its own right. I think that's why they're not pushing PS Now too strongly, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think that's because I think as we've all alluded to, the kind of general public opinion of what PS Now is. I think I don't think there's much marketing which could save the image of it, I suppose is a good way to word it. So what do you do rather than rebrand it or make something new? Another one here, from Warlocky71. I think Sony have based their business model on selling consoles to sell games. This is starting to change, though, so it means their plans need to change, but it may take a while.
Yeah, I agree.
Another one here from the Indie Gamer who says there's probs a deal that says it can't go to, again, regarding MLB, there's probs a deal that says it can't go into another subscription service for a period of time.
That would be a slap, wasn't it, if there was an exclusivity deal for it to come onto a service. Ouch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Tukangula has actually posted some stats regarding PS Now versus Game Pass. PlayStation or PS Now user base is about 2.2 million against Microsoft Game Pass, which is obviously 18 plus million. Shizno Elite here says, I cannot stand what Sony are doing with the timed exclusive BS, and they've ruined Spider-Man for me. Spider-Man and Final Fantasy were multi-platform for years. Not now, but Xbox does with Tomb Raider, and they get called out for it. The double standard is ridiculous. And the final one I've got here currently is, although I have seen this answered in the chat or responded to in the chat, from Dragonwolf, who says, will Sony ever become a dev just like Sega? But again, as people have said in the chat about this before you answer, PlayStation is Sony's biggest business now in terms of where the money comes from, isn't it? So I personally don't see that happening, but what's your take on that?
Well, that was a question that was asked on the Game on Daily podcast, I believe. I think that's quite a good question, actually. I think King David answered it. I don't think people think that's obviously going to happen. But if Sony ever wanted to pull out the market, they could do that. I mean, it is an option they wanted to do. But there's absolutely no reason for them to do that at this moment in time, is there, whatsoever? I can't see it.
Yeah, definitely. But I've just seen another comment from Jack Morph as well. It kind of feeds on this one in a way. He says, does Sony have enough studios to feed their own Game Pass? I mean, they did relatively recently form their own PlayStation Studios, didn't they? With a very Marvel-looking cinematic intro of it.
That's just the name for the collection of their first-party studios, isn't it? But I mean, the Japan studios had a restructure, and some people have. But
Dragon Ball's question here, though, is do they have enough under that banner to form a substantial Game Pass equivalent? I guess
had this been a year ago, we wouldn't even be asking this question. I guess we're only asking this question
exactly.
because of the Bethesda deal. If I'm honest, because that's obviously significantly increased Microsoft's first-party studio lineup. Wow. Okay,
that's my last question. Yeah, that was 10 minutes of chat. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Wow, the chat's been on fire tonight. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I think we're going to have to leave that topic there. We could probably talk about this one for a long time. I think most people probably agree that Xbox has changed the gaming landscape. Whether you agree whether that's a good thing long-term or not, I guess that's a personal opinion and based on many, many different factors, some of which we've covered tonight. But let's get on to topic 3 if we can. And it is quite an exciting one, and it kind of feeds into what we were talking about a second ago. Perhaps we'll come to you, Scott, first, if that's okay. Kojima and Xbox, rumoured to be in talks. Kojima Productions. What do you think? Do you think there's something in these rumours? Because I think it was Jeff Grubb from VentureBeat that mentioned it, and he's rarely wrong on these sort of things. What's your take?
Yeah, it's funny you started this topic with exciting with comment like that, it's potentially exciting news. And I'll start by saying I don't really care for Kojima games. Let me just get that out in the open. I do have to make these admissions that I do fear is going to cost me some credit a little bit. I've talked about my dislike of Red Dead and things like that.
No, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion as much as anyone else's.
Really do it for me, and if I'm being perfectly honest, Death Stranding looked like one of the most boring games on the planet. But I could skip past that. But I think what I can say though is outside of sort of my love or lack thereof for Kojima's games, it can't be denied that he's kind of one of these few celebrity game developers. His name carries weight that I think few other developers do, whether you like his games or not. And I can just see Indy calling me a fraud there. I won't accept that from you, Indy. I remember you bought a pre-built PC, mate, so you can. Yeah, so I can't deny that it would be a massive get for Microsoft. Kojima's name, like I say, it does carry weight, and people will pay attention if they do find that Kojima's next game is exclusive to the Xbox platform, which, if rumors are to believe, it may well be. As you say, someone like Jeff Grubb, he's got a really good track record on these sorts of things. So it's difficult not to trust what he says a lot of times. Obviously, ultimately, it'll come down to, right, what is the game and is it any good ultimately? And if it is, then fantastic. We've got another game, and obviously Kojima gets the money to publish that on Xbox and probably more specifically Game Pass. But I mean, personally, until I see the game, I'm not really going to get excited. But the biggest thing would be Kojima's association with Sony over the years, going back to when Metal Gear was exclusive to the PlayStation. Obviously, Sony let Kojima Productions use the Decima engine, which I believe is Guerrilla's engine that they used for Horizon Zero Dawn, if I remember correctly. So there's obviously a good relationship there, but it seems like this stems from previous rumors of Kojima working with Google on an exclusive Stadia game. I think Kojima has commented in the past on his sort of appetite to create a cloud game. And obviously, if Google aren't that company, then the next best company to work with is probably Microsoft at this stage. So it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Obviously, this is probably 4 or 5 years down the line at this point. The one thing I will say about Death Stranding, even though I didn't particularly like the look of it, it looked stunning. And also the fact that he managed to get that out in such a short period of time is nothing more than astounding. I couldn't believe that game came out when it did. But obviously, he wouldn't be able to use the Decima engine. So the question would be, would he use one of Microsoft's? Would he use Unreal with the help of the Coalition? Could he potentially use id Tech now if he's going to be working with Microsoft? And how does that impact the development of the game? But it's like this is some way off. So we'll probably have to wait and see. But it would be a massive, massive deal in our bubble. I think outside of our bubble, I'm not too sure if it would mean an awful lot until the game comes out. And obviously, if the game's good, then it means something. But until then, I think remains to be seen.
Yeah, no, fair point. I knew it was going to be divisive because, Kojima, and I got to be honest, Scott, I think I'm of a similar opinion, to be honest. And perhaps we'll come to you next, Luke, if that's all right. A couple of things, what's your take on the Kojima deal? Do you think it's a good thing and exciting? But Stubbs has written in the comments, actually, it will help get a foot in Asia. And there's lots of rumours around, we're obviously with Sony, with what they're doing with their recent studios and stuff, and people walking out. And, the swingometer seems to be swinging towards Microsoft, even in Japan and the East Asian markets. Do you think this sends out a good message to the Japanese devs? That if Kojima can deal with Xbox, then that's the place to be.
Yes, in that sense, I think it would help with other Japanese developers because, as Scott has alluded to, Kojima's name carries significant weight, and to my mind, for the reason because I absolutely love his games, but in that sense, it would help in Asian markets. But I think I saw some comments from some people to the effect of, this will help kind of bolster, Game Pass subscriptions and, maybe console sales in those markets. And I actually think it wouldn't do that really at all because Kojima is Kojima Productions, Japanese developer, but Kojima's games are not traditional Japanese games. They are not Japanese influenced in terms of, the kind of cultural backdrop to his games, right? He is an ardent fan of Western films, right, and Western projects, and his games are Western projects in all but name. They sell their best in the West. So, it's not the type of game, whatever Kojima is making next, you can guarantee it is not going to be the type of game that will push people in those markets to go out and really support a service that it's on. I'm sure there will be some influence, right? But it's not going to be massive. For me, I think it's on a selfish level, the idea of Kojima working with Microsoft is really exciting to me, because he will no doubt have a pretty significant budget if they're publishing the game. And the bigger the budget Kojima gets, the wilder his games tend to get. And I just love that, right? And Death Stranding definitely had quite a significant budget.
So what was your take on Death Stranding, just quickly?
I loved it. It was my game of the year up until I played Outer Wilds that year.
Wow. Okay.
But then, if you're a Kojima fan, you're gonna love his games anyway, right? I don't think I've ever played a Kojima game I haven't enjoyed. Huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid series. And Death Stranding is one of the weirdest received games I've ever seen, because actually in that year, if you look on Metacritic, it got more perfect scores than any other game on Metacritic that year.
Wow.
Yet it came out with a kind of, I think, below 80 average, because some people just absolutely adored it and thought it was a masterpiece, and some people just hated it, just thought it was utterly boring, and if you play that game, there's no in between, I think, right? It's either you will love it or you will not like it at all, because it is such a and I think this is the thing why I love Death Stranding, because it's such a risk-taking game, right? It's a AAA game, but it takes all kinds of risks, and you don't see that often, right? In an industry which homogenizes how its games are. You don't have to look at Ubisoft games, right? There is nothing out there like Death Stranding in the AAA space, and for that reason, it's more of an indie game. It feels more like an indie game on a super high budget, because it does take loads of risks, and it does things that other games don't. It doesn't prioritize combat at all. It's about this kind of journey. It's managing your backpacks as you go along and walk across this landscape. It's it's bizarre, right? It's a bizarre game. It's got a bizarre story. But to me, it was wonderful. And I really hope they update it for like PS5, or I should probably just buy it on PC, but I'm generally averse to buying it again. So we'll see. But
so do you think it's a status symbol for Xbox to have Kojima on?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, to be honest, I have a suspicion that Phil is probably just a huge Kojima fan.
Yeah.
And I think he probably heard that this, maybe he'd heard that, look, Sony aren't going to be funding Kojima's next game. He's looking for a partner, perhaps, he's got these ideas. And I think as soon as Phil probably heard that, he was one of the first in the queue. And, Jeff Grubb's super reliable, so I'm pretty sure whatever he says is accurate here. So I think, he would have gone out and said, look, we want to bring your game to as many people as possible on Game Pass. We will give you a budget for it. And Kojima probably looked at that, Kojima Productions is an independent studio, right? I'm sure you've got costs to keep running, but ultimately they're all, their success and their continued existence is predicated on getting publishing partners.
Apparently their studios are incredibly expensive. I think didn't they have a 7-story skyscraper, and they had a dedicated room just for their Nerf guns and things like that.
I'm not sure, but certainly if you look at certainly the Kojima Productions itself have grown a lot, right? They've hired quite a lot of developers recently as well, so they're ramping up their production, and the thing is, as alluded to, Kojima's games are a high budget. I don't think he'd have it any other way. He's not going to do stuff on a whim on something to scrape by on. He needs funding to get what he wants. So I think it's a great, it's a great deal. To be honest, it wouldn't matter who was funding it, even if it was Stadia, even if Stadia were actually funding Kojima's game and it's exclusive to that platform, I would go out and I would get some kind of Stadia capability to be able to play it. That's how much I love his games. But to me, it's just exciting that someone has and someone as obviously as wealthy as Microsoft has probably it's all rumors, but I'm sure it's happening. Has said, we'll fund your game and we'll publish it. It'll be on Game Pass. They'll, obviously they'll have a PC version. That was one of the prerequisites for the Death Stranding deal. I think it's great for Microsoft. I think it's great for Kojima, and more importantly, it's great for me because I love Kojima's games. So,
selfishly speaking,
on one of Luke's points there, actually, and I think Luke just made a really, really interesting comment there. He's just said, regardless of where Kojima's game was going to be, he would go out and he would find a way of playing, even if that meant taking out a new subscription or getting new hardware for Stadia. Now, I guess a question for the panel and obviously the chat as well: are there any other developers, like not studios, but an individual developer that has that appeal to gamers? Because while I don't hold that same opinion of Kojima in his games, there are people that have that opinion on Kojima himself. His studio is named after himself, for God's sake. There are very few developers like that currently in the industry, in my opinion, and I think that's what makes this potentially a big deal, regardless of how you feel about his games. That one comment alone sort of highlights how this could be a big deal for Microsoft, because there may be a small portion of people, but there will be other people like Luke who think like that. And obviously everything else that comes with it, just from a positive PR perspective, it's good because Kojima and Xbox is good for Xbox kind of thing, regardless of whether you like the game or not. And even if the game turns out to be fairly average, it's still Kojima's game exclusive to Xbox. And I think, that's a big deal. And it's a really interesting comment from Luke when you say that, Luke, because I would ask you, is there any other individual developer that you would say that same thing about?
For me, no. As in, like, an individual, i.e., Hideo Kojima. No. I don't think there is. I really don't think there is.
There isn't for me. So Keyhall's put Peter Molyneux back in the day. I'm guessing.
Oh no, stay away from Peter Molyneux.
Well, I'm guessing that's but is that Peter Molyneux or is that a Fable thing? I'm guessing. But you know what? The one for me, and it's not an individual, but Bethesda. I love Bethesda games. I love the Elder Scroll games and the Fallout games. If they were exclusive to PlayStation 5, I would probably go and buy a PlayStation 5 to play those. Genuinely.
Yeah. But I guess that's Bethesda, not necessarily.
It's not
Todd Howard.
That's a good point.
I mean, if Todd Howard turned out and said, I guess if Todd Howard went independent, he left Bethesda and made his own, that he would be a big name, I guess, in the indie space. And someone like that's been in the news recently is Jade Raymond, but on a much smaller level. Her name carried a little bit of weight, but she hasn't released anything in a long time. And obviously she was part of a much bigger sort of development team at Ubisoft in a year. So there's just not very many of those sort of, like I say, celebrity, like Hollywood game developers these days. And
Ken Levine, what's Ken Levine up to nowadays? Where's he gone?
He's got his own studio. He's building some
on BioShock.
Still. No. BioShock's being developed by 2K, but a separate studio.
Okay.
Ken Levine is doing apparently maybe a AA, AAA potentially game, but it's probably going to be more indie sensibilities compared to BioShock. I actually thought of one other developer that I do say that for in the same way as Kojima, but it's nowhere near as a big name. But it's Fumito Ueda, who was the creative director on Eco, Shadow of the Colossus, Last Guardian, etc. That's the only other person that I think I'd follow them anywhere to get their game.
Yeah,
but it's rare. It's super rare, right?
Pux, you were going to say something, mate?
Yeah, so this one's a bit left field, but I think my only comment to that would be I think Nintendo in general fits that category well, and for me specifically, Eiji Aonuma, who is the main creative director of The Legend of Zelda and has been for the last 20 odd years. I mean, that is my number one franchise of all time. I've played all the titles and I'll always jump to play them as soon as I can. And I think there'll be a lot of people that actually really like those Nintendo titles as well, especially. I can't remember the guys. Go on, sorry.
Well, let's put this as an example, and not that this would happen in a million years. I'm not suggesting it would, but let's say Luna, exclusively had those games. Would that be enough for you to subscribe to Luna to play those games then?
If they exclusively had Legend of Zelda titles that I couldn't play anywhere else, 100% I would subscribe to at least finish the games. Not necessarily to maintain a subscription forever, but I would 100% sign up just to play them. And I think there might be a lot of people in that Nintendo camp as well. I'd like to believe so, at least. But for me, they're the only other people I can, or rather the specific developers of those key franchises in Nintendo, I think are the only other ones outside of what the panel have already said that I think people would jump to, at least for me.
So what's your take on Kojima then, Pucks? Are you a Kojima fan? Do you think this is good for Xbox?
I'm kind of similar to Scott here. I mean, not to say that I'm not a fan, but I haven't really just ever given myself the time to play any of the previous titles, mainly like Metal Gear Solid or the old Silent Hills and whatever else. And regarding Death Stranding, again, it's a game which I always found it strange and a bit weird. I know that exactly. I didn't have much time to kind of play the game at the time anyway, but the very limited media I did read about it kind of just summed up to being it's a glorified walking sim. And I kind of saw those lines. Those lines and thought, yeah, you know what? I'm happy to give this a miss.
Yeah, no, they really did do that some damage, didn't they, the media?
But given what Luke's just said, saying it was like his game of the year until Outer Wilds, then I'm missing something. So at some point, I may well have to go back and see if I can play it.
Well, I guess for me, as someone who hasn't played it, the visuals are stunning, but it just looks weird to play. So, I have no leg to stand on when it comes to an opinion. It just seems weird to me. But there's been a few people in the chat, obviously yourself, Luke, saying, despite its weirdness, it's a brilliant game. And I just don't think you pick up on that seeing the visuals, do you?
I can't think of anything to hand specifically, but I know there are a lot of other titles out there which kind of do also fall into that category of being a bit weird, but people love them. I mean, this is a bit old school, but do you remember like the old Papa the Rapper games on the PlayStation 1? Like they were weird, but people loved them and it did sell.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know Luke was going to say something. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing. Even stuff like, if you think about stuff like Jet Set Radio, right? Super weird premise of a game, but super popular, and some people really hated it, right? But other people loved it. So a different stroke for the different folks.
Cool. I can live with weird or strange, but not stupidly weird. Yeah, I'll have to take you.
That's Kojima, pretty much.
Exactly. So, no, that's really cool. Kind of knew this might be a little bit divisive around Kojima and stuff because, and I was kind of interested to see if if that might sucker in some more sort of Japanese developers and stuff because I know Xbox have a very strong anchoring for more Japanese developers on board to obviously help capture that market. And although it's not going to, be everyone's cup of tea, it's certainly very divisive, and people sort of, it's one of those Marmite kind of developers, I guess. Let's just move on to another quick one then. What do we make on PlayStation's decision to let Naughty Dog carry out the remake of The Last of Us? What do we make of that, guys? Scott, I think you actually ran with the story, didn't you? You posted it in the Discord channel. What do you make of this? Because it does seem like PlayStation are doubling down on their big first-party titles.
Yeah, I think I guess maybe it's probably worth mentioning that this story, as we've alluded to a little bit earlier in the conversation, was brought up by Jason Schreier earlier this week. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the article, I would highly recommend you do, because it is a fascinating insight into sort of the ongoings behind the scenes at Sony. And I think maybe as another topic for another time, it does offer sort of a fascinating insight into the different approaches that both Microsoft and Sony have. But essentially, it seems to boil down to the fact that Sony really just want to focus on just these big budget titles and just getting out, the likes of God of War, the likes of The Last of Us, the likes of Uncharted, and things like that. Now, the Last of Us story is interesting because the way it sort of seems to have, I guess, began is fascinating, because it was sort of a small group of developers that wanted to do it, that pitched it, who never got anywhere, and then Sony said, "Oh well, Naughty Dog, you go ahead and do it." And I think The Last of Us really it's a game that's already been released on
PS4.
PlayStation. Yeah, it was a PlayStation 3, and then it got a remaster on PlayStation 4, and then it's going to be remade on PlayStation 5, and all that's going to happen within about 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years. I don't think it's necessarily a game that needs a remake at this point, but and this kind of it kind of all sort of wraps up in the same conversation we had earlier, Flap, in my opinion, around like PS Now and will Sony sort of follow Microsoft's lead? And I think I tweeted about this at the time, and whether it's the right or wrong decision from a gamer's perspective, the way Sony are going to look at that, they're going to look at it and go, this is going to sell like hotcakes. So why wouldn't they do it? This is a known franchise that's getting an HBO adaptation fairly recently. If they could tie the two together in some loose way, they could really capitalize in terms of sales. The Last of Us Part 2 was a massive, massive success, both sort of financially as well as critically. And maybe some people who played The Last of Us Part 2 or saw the success or that the reviews of Last of Us Part 2 who didn't get around to playing the first game, this is a really good opportunity to sort of almost resell that game. I kind of look at it in a similar way to how Nintendo approaches a lot of things. Nintendo will resell you the game over and over and over again, and people buy and buy and buy those games without batting an eyelid. If it's going to sell, then Sony are going to do it. Whether it's needed or not is almost irrelevant, because if it sells, then that kind of answers Sony's question, like, yes, people want to play this game again in the highest fidelity that they can in the Last of Us Part 2.
I disagree.
Okay.
No, well, I don't disagree, and I will explain what I mean. I agree with everything you've said, but I disagree whether it's a good strategy or not for Sony. That's the bit I disagree with. I
guess
agree.
I'm not saying it's a good or bad strategy. I think it's just they'll look at it and they'll go, will this make us money? And if the answer to that's yes, then they'll green light.
But that's that's the part I think isn't necessarily a good strategy, and I'll explain why. Because I was actually going to draw the comparison between Nintendo and Sony myself, and Nintendo fans and Sony fans are very different people. And Nintendo fans will go and keep buying the same thing over and over and over, and that's what Nintendo do different. That that is their sort of USP almost. They really do wring out every last drop of fun out of their games and resell them, and the fans lap it up. They absolutely love it, and that's absolutely fine. I don't think Sony fans are of the same ilk as those diehard Nintendo fans that will buy something over and over and over again. I think you're right. I think it will make money, but my point is, will it be see, it's not sustainable, is it? This is the thing. You can remake a game and it will be a quick cash grab, and that's fine. But I would have thought Sony would be in a position where they don't just want a quick cash grab. Why don't they come out with a new IP or progress an existing IP, or even something that's slightly older? How about an Uncharted remake? For me, there's plenty of other games that they could have done this on. But also to give those duties to Naughty Dog themselves seems such a waste, because they had Ben Studios that they could have worked on that and progressed that. It just seems a very peculiar decision. Luke, we'll come to you if that's all right. What's your take on all of this?
So I agree pretty much with Scott on all of that, actually. I think there's lots of different layers to this, so I'll try and go through them, kind of bit by bit. But I think personally, do I want to see a Last of Us remake? I'm in the category of that Nintendo fan that will buy the same game over again, and I would buy it, right? I don't think there's an inherent need from my own perspective for a remake of that game, because The Last of Us, to this day, especially if you pick up the PS4 version, right, it still looks really nice. It's not like a Demon's Souls where there's a remake of Demon's Souls, because Demon's Souls was, even on the PS3, it was quite archaic, in its visuals, in its sound design, etc. And it's a complete transformation to the point where it's one of the best looking next gen games that there is out now. And I can say that firsthand as someone who's experienced a lot of the next gen games. It's not like that. It's not the same scenario. Last of Us to this day still plays really well. It still looks good. It has PS4 Pro support, so you get 4K 60.
So why does it need a remaster?
Yeah,
Or
so
remake?
from my perspective, I don't know why it needs a remaster. From Sony's perspective, I can see or remake. Sorry, yeah. From Sony's perspective, I can see why, because as Scott alluded to, they have a TV show coming out. They will no doubt put a significant budget behind it so that it's up to the standards of The Last of Us Part 2, which is a phenomenal looking game.
Yeah.
It looks incredible. And they will probably find a way to bundle that story together, in terms of a kind of 2-for-1 kind of deal. Perhaps, this is Sony to some extent we're talking about, so who knows how much this will cost. But so I totally get that. And I am one of those sad people that will very willingly go out and buy it, because I've played The Last of Us, the first one, probably 2 or 3 times. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I'm a big fan of the franchise. So there's no doubt that I'd buy it. I don't necessarily think it's a waste of resources for Naughty Dog, because because first of all, Naughty Dog are massive in terms of studio size. They're growing all the time. And also, it's not like it's going to be the entire studio that's going to be on this, right? It will be a team within the studio, probably in connection with other developers to some extent, that will be building this. And so, Naughty Dog are clearly working on Factions, a separate standalone multiplayer thing from The Last of Us Part 2 for PS5. I think that's quite obvious. I mean, they've already said that they're working on that essentially. And no doubt they're working on, they've probably got pre-production on either a new IP or a sequel to The Last of Us Part 2. I suspect it's probably a new IP at this point. So, they've got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. And I think that this won't take that many resources away from them. It is just, personally to me, it is just a bit weird, because I do agree that, like, you could look at maybe a first Uncharted game, which was highlighted in that article. In fact, the team at San Diego Studios that came up with this idea of branching out and becoming more of a kind of a first party developer for Sony in terms of the content they were producing. The first game that they apparently considered was Uncharted, but they found that it would just be too much work. It would be even more expensive than doing a lot, because it would just require like changes to game design and stuff like that. Because if anybody's ever played the first Uncharted, which I have, it's a decent game, but it has a lot of problems, right? It wasn't until Uncharted 2 where Naughty Dog really got their groove going in terms of that franchise.
You know what? It wasn't until Uncharted 2 I realised all of the problems of the first one, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I can totally see why they probably looked at that and then turned around and went, what, that's going to take too long. It's not what, Uncharted is a hugely successful franchise, but I think it's even compared to The Last of Us, it's not as bankable a franchise as The Last of Us is, because I think The Last of Us is just this kind of phenomenon, whereas Uncharted is a huge seller, and it's a tentpole franchise for Sony, but not in the same way, or not quite at the same level The Last of Us is. So, it's weird, isn't it? Like, I'm really conflicted by it all, because I do, like, to some extent, I'm like, well, you could probably just save these resources for something brand new, but is that the thing that makes the most money for Sony? Maybe it's not. Right?
But what is this? Why are we? I know Sony's a business, and don't get me wrong. I appreciate they're all businesses and they're all here to make a buck. But there comes a point where you have to sort of innovate and experiment. And Sony have been great championing this, and they seem to be a cash grab in a cash grab sort of state at the moment. And that's the bit that kind of worries me, because it's not sustainable, is it? Long term, it's not sustainable. And I do agree, Sony have time on their hands, but if they're just after cash grabs all of a sudden, that worries me, because Sony were a company of innovation and giving smaller developers a chance and breathing space to do weird and crazy things like Parappa the Rapper and all kinds of stuff like that. If we're in this sort of cash grab era, that worries me, if I'm honest.
Well, I think again, it's a bit of a difficult one to answer, because I think if you look at it from a standpoint of, are they just cash grabbing, doing remasters, remakes, then they've done some remasters, and obviously they've done, Demon's Souls remake, which certainly I don't think it's, never a cash grab. I think that was more of a passion project, right?
Yeah,
that was
okay.
that was a thing that, by all accounts, has sold very well. But it's Sony. I don't think Sony ever looked at that and went, "Oh yeah, that's gonna make us tons and tons of money." I think it was more trying to introduce players to that universe and introduce players to that game in a more modern way. Last of Us Remake, is clearly a bit of a cash grab, right? Because it ties into trying to get people into the show and keep its enduring popularity going. And certainly, if you look at that article, and this is obviously a bigger topic, but they are looking to shift their development into, at least their first party development, into these bigger titles. But I think within that, they're still doing new IP. They're still expanding their first party studios. Sony Santa Monica, by all accounts, have a new IP in development alongside God of War, at least from job listings, etc. But I think it's clear they are being a lot more cautious about what they fund and how they fund it. And I don't think in their first party there's room, or they don't feel there's room to kind of give a load of these smaller kind of experimental titles much space. And I suspect that what they're trying to do is fill that outside of first party in terms of their second party stuff, and then third party exclusives and independent games, etc. I think that's what they feel, and I totally get that. Like for me, like I really don't like that. Sounds like great to me. I don't want to like stand Sony for doing this, but like that's why I buy a PlayStation, right? I buy it for their first party. I buy it for these big, cinema-esque blockbuster releases. That's why I buy that console. And if they're putting more money into that and giving me more of that, then fantastic. So that's what I want. And even though I don't particularly want a Last of Us remake, as in, I'm not clamoring for it. Of course, I'm going to buy it. Of course I am. I'm a hopeless consumer, bound by having to go. Just like I'll buy anything that Nintendo remake with or remaster with minimum effort, like as Puxley said, right? We all sit there. I'm sure Pux did the same for stuff like the 3D collection, right? Where you look at that and you go, you've really just put in like the minimal effort for that. But of course, I'm going to buy it. Like I'm going to buy that. So,
Sunshine in 16:9, yes, please.
Yes, please. Brilliant. Can't wait.
But I don't know why, but it just seems to work for Nintendo, and I don't think any less of Nintendo for that. And to be honest, I don't think less of Sony. I don't think less of them. I just find it a peculiar strategy. But for Nintendo, I think because their IP is so unique that it kind of works. Whereas, like I say, Xbox and Sony or PlayStation find themselves in this symbiosis, and they're very similar in lots of regards. That it feels like Nintendo's out on a limb and they can get away with it. But when Sony does it, it just feels like an odd move. But perhaps that's unfair. Pux, did you play Last of Us? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I didn't play The Last of Us Part 2. I played The Last of Us Remaster on PS4. Really enjoyed it. I appreciate everything that Luke said as well. I don't know what the sales numbers are like, but at least just from my perspective, I appreciate that a lot of people love the story of The Last of Us and all of the different kind of, I don't know, political points it kind of hit, I guess, or just the emotional story beats. But I don't know whether or not
changes with a remake, does it?
This is the difference, I guess, because just to be clear of what we are calling a remake versus a remaster, in my mind, a remake is a retelling of the original, which means that the overall story beats are going to be different. So, are they, is it like a weird plot or ploy to try and retell the story of The Last of Us to create a different outcome overall? I don't know, but in my mind, when I hear the word remake, I'm thinking a retelling of the original, not just another uplift of an already created remaster on PS4, if that makes sense.
I thought a remake is they literally started again and remade the entire game from scratch. Perhaps Luke, Scott, chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my take on remake. Whereas a remaster,
I'm with you. I'm with you, Flap.
Yeah,
it's weird. I do know where Pux is coming from though, because I think even the notion of what is a remake now has been changed by certain games. So if you look at stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, that is a it follows many of the same plot points of the original, but it does retell the story. You know what I mean? Like it does change things, and it does introduce new things to it. Not just take a complete overhaul of the type of game that was. Obviously new visuals, etc. And then on the opposite spectrum, if you like look at the basic remake, distinct from a remaster, right, which I think we'll all agree is just the original game, but with kind of an uplift usually in resolution and or frame rate. You've got something like Demon Souls, which is all running on the original code of the game. It's been slightly tweaked to make it more modern, but other than that, it's the exact same story, exact same environments, everything else, but every asset has been remade. So yeah, I kind of agree with everyone oddly in that what do you call a remake now, because there are different types of how you do a remake. So I don't think they would touch the story at all of The Last of Us. I just don't think. I think it's a perfect story, as perfect a story as you're going to get in that medium. So I don't think they would touch it. But it would be, to me, it would be more of a Demon Souls style remake.
Well, let's put it to you then, Pucks. Let's assume they didn't change the story and it was, next gen in all of its glory. Would you rebuy it?
No.
Right. And how about if the story was slightly tweaked?
It depends how much, I guess. I mean, I loved it for the story, but I don't think I'm as in love with it as Luke, for example. In that I would 100% buy it again because it was a great game. I mean, by all means, even my partner sat down with me and watched me play the whole thing. We both absolutely loved the story. It's like, an interactive film with shooting elements, etc. But I don't know. I do kind of feel that something like Uncharted could have a second lease of life, but maybe not with Nathan Drake, because I think the timing between Uncharted 3 and 4, I think was enough that, Uncharted 4, there was enough hype for it coming, and then I think it concluded the whole story of Nathan Drake brilliantly. I absolutely loved the whole franchise and the different kind of story beats that happened through there. And it kind of ends where you see, Nathan Drake's kind of teenage daughter at this point in time. So I kind of feel like they could maybe reinvent Uncharted to maybe be a new character or continue the Nathan Drake saga via the daughter, for example. So I feel like maybe that could be a good thing to do instead. But going back to what you said about The Last of Us, as everyone's been saying in the chat, and after everything I've read online as well, I do agree that I think it is too soon, because we've only just wrapped up The Last of Us Part 2, which I've not played, but I've watched most of the playthrough, to be fair. And from it ties up most of the loose ends, if not all of them. I think a lot of people are satisfied with the ending. Especially the emotional setting behind it. It was a very complicated story, very well told, but it was very complex in terms of the different emotional aspects and the points of view and understanding. You know what I mean? It was a lot of emotional kind of perspective takes on the same scenario, which I think was brilliantly told. I just kind of feel like why would you come off that to saying you're now going to release the first one again? I mean, is it just because everyone said that they love Joel so much and didn't want what happened to him? No spoilers. Didn't want what happened to him in The Last of Us Part 2 to be real, and maybe this is their way to some form of redemption. I don't know.
There is a marketing angle, like you say. There is a TV series coming out, so I'm guessing this is to help promote that to a certain degree. Although there are plenty of other things they could have done, isn't there?
That's a good point, actually, because games like Ratchet and Clank, for example, I mean, that had a remake back in 2016 of the first game, but the remake was actually a tie-in with what was actually the Ratchet and Clank movie, I believe, came out at the time as well. So the cutscenes that are in the game were actually scenes from the movie, even though it was all 3D CGI, but they kind of went toe-to-toe. So yeah, maybe you're right there. Maybe it is just a way to tie in with the series, perhaps. But I don't know. I just feel like maybe it's too soon because, movies and trying to get money that way aside, I mean, The Last of Us is a game at the end of the day, and people absolutely adore it for what it is. I just don't think. I think it's too soon to to experiment with it at this stage.
It feels like it is, doesn't it? Like you say, certainly on the back of Last of Us 2. And, I'm guessing, Game of the Year and stuff, there's lots of hype around the franchise in general. But, yeah, it just seems like there's, it does seem too soon. It just seems like there's other things they could be working on. But what do I know? I'm not Sony. I'm sure they've got a master plan that we're all blissfully unaware of and that it will all pan out fine in the end. But, yeah, cash grab or not. Are we up to speed?
Yeah, go on. So as Luke was saying as well, even with the same regards to Nintendo, how people get so angry and so vocal negatively about buying remakes. But whilst these same people are holding their pitchforks and throwing explicit at everyone, they've got a pitchfork in one hand, but they're exchanging their cash with the other one. So people will buy it nonetheless. I no doubt.
Yeah, no, I
sorry.
No doubt.
Yeah, and we are caught up with chat, by the way.
Oh, we are? Oh, cool. Excellent. Well, I think we're going to wrap the show up there then, gentlemen, if you don't mind. That's, wow, what a show. This has been, like I say, it's always the topics that you never think are going to sort of take off, the ones that do. It's been a very interesting time for gamers in general. And, there's been lots of PlayStation news floating around, not all of it positive, unfortunately. But, Sony are keeping very silent. They've said virtually nothing, really. So, it does leave speculation and assumptions, to run wild in those sort of silences, and we don't know the answers, but we're still free to speculate on those. I think Sony are in a good place. Just makes me wonder what their long-term plan is and when they're going to start showing that. But very interesting. Well, thank you very much, chat. It's been fantastic. We had some great chat going on tonight. Lots of people in the chat. It's been fantastic. Luke Steele, we'll go in order again. Thank you for being part of the show, mate. Did you have a good time?
Oh, of course. Always.
As always.
So, you don't even have to ask that question. I always have a great time, although I am sad it's not a bank holiday this time.
Yes, that was nice.
Very true. Yeah.
Although in the UK we do have a couple of bank holidays coming up towards the end of the month, don't we? So, or the beginning of the next month. So, that's good. We are going to try and get another competition going with a different podcast crew. Don't know who that's going to be. Possibly Fun Speculation if he's up for it, or even Boom. Don't know. Just need to approach some people and find out what the game's going to be and times and stuff like that. We really do enjoy those competitions. I like playing new games for the first time. Rogue Company, we played Wandering Dutch. If you want to check that video out of the GPG crew taking on a midweek mix-up, and Fugly, God bless him, who stepped in literally at the very last second. I contacted him and said, because Wandering Dutch's team were a man down at short notice, and with about 15 minutes left to go before we went live, I contacted Fugly and said, do you fancy joining the team? He's like, yeah, what game? I said, Rogue Company. He said, well, I haven't got it. I'll have to download it. And thankfully, he managed to download it in about 10 minutes, and we were ready to go. Other than technical issues within the game, but we had a great time. Go and check that out on the channel. One other thing before I carry on with the rest of the panel is obviously check out our Discord server as well. I will try and get the invite sorted out. Thank you, Dragon Wolf, for letting us know about that. I'm not sure what's happened there. They do time out after a little while, so I'll have to update that. And obviously like, share and subscribe and spread the word if you can. I'd be very much grateful. Puxley, thank you very much. We've obviously done this on OBS tonight and not via StreamYard. How have you found it, Pux?
I think it's been very good, actually. I've really enjoyed this. I was actually going to say to the chat as well, by all means, please let us know what you think of this format. First time we've done a stream through OBS. All the overlays you see on the screen are of our own kind of design, so to speak. It's a first pass. We like it so far, but we'd appreciate any feedback, things that you like about this, what you don't like. We'll try and improve and be better for all of you. But yeah, apart from that, I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been really good. I know there's a few little things we want to try and improve here and there that we've already spoken about, but I think this has been very successful. I think it's a good format to go forward for us.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And OBS, it's free, but it gives you so much creative freedom. And like you said, Pax, this is the first pass, really. We kind of threw this together, really, so this isn't how it's going to end up. We do have actually some rebranding coming later on in the year, actually, so that will all be happening. But
just to add before you move on as well, regarding the Rogue Company stream, I just want to say to people that we streamed it on our GPD channel, so please check that out. But Wandering Dutch also did stream their perspective as well, so I'd like to encourage you all to check his stream out as well as our own if you'd like to see both of our Rogue Company skills.
You know what? That's a very good point. I did mean to check that out, and I still haven't done that yet. I do want to see that.
I did watch it actually. It's funny.
Are they
I enjoyed
swearing
the
about
stream.
us? Are they swearing about us?
I think there's a few players that swear a bit. It's entertaining.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll have to watch that. Scott, again, thank you very much for being here, my friend. We've all got our GPG mugs now as well. I meant to mention that earlier. So we're all in the mug gang.
Yeah.
A few select people have had mugs sent out to them as well in the chat. It was just a random pick. Thank you for being here, Scott. How have you found tonight's topics?
Loved it. A couple of spicy topics, I felt, with the second and third topics that we had there. So as always, loved it. So thank you very much. And obviously thank you very much to everyone in chat. There was a lot of chatter going on today on the topics, which is always fantastic to see. So and with OBS, it seems everything has gone relatively smoothly.
Yes,
I don't think we've had any hiccups whatsoever. So well done on that, mate, because I know it was sort of a late decision to switch across, but it all seems to have gone swimmingly.
That's a good point. 'Cause actually, this morning we were going to do it via StreamYard, and then by sort of midday, it's like, actually, I think I'll give OBS a go. So here we are. And like you say, it's all gone flawlessly so far. The show isn't over just yet. But, thank you very much, anyone. Like Puck said, we will gratefully receive any feedback on quality of the stream, audio levels, anything like that. Just give us some heads up whether you like it, whether you didn't, and we'll take that all on board. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Thank you very much, panel. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. Safe gaming, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.